Chapter 641. The Complete Pangu Axe B0 Zenvel. Siam Yili looked at the 9th tier Dark Race members calmly and said slowly, "He'll say it again. You guys can fight after I retrieve something. I'm done." Now who agrees and who opposes? The 9th tier Dark Race member was furious. He glared at Yili. "I object." Unfortunately, as soon as the level 9 Dark Race member finished speaking, he was annihilated. The entire process was so fast that it left one speechless. Shocked, utterly shocked. The eyes of the dozen or so genetic warriors and the Dark Race members widened for the largest time in history. Their faces were as shocked as they could be. Then this group of Dark Race members came back to their senses. A thought appeared in their minds at the same time, and that was to escape. This group of Dark Race members had reached the fastest speed in history. Yili didn't chase after them because these Dark Race members had nothing to do with him. His goal was only the Pangu Axe fragment. The genetic warriors led by the old man in the traditional Chinese suit looked at Yili in shock. They had never seen a terrifying genetic warrior like Yili. "Senior, you want to take something, right? Please go ahead," the old man in the traditional Chinese suit hurriedly said. Immediately, more than 10 genetic warriors made way for Yili. Yili's handsome face was as calm as water. He looked indifferently at the stone axe on the ground. The stone axe had sunk very deep. "Get out of the way," Yili said slowly. The dozen or so genetic warriors were a little confused, but how could they dare to disobey Yili? They retreated far away. However, Yili raised his leg and stomped on the ground. In an instant, the stone axe was shaken out. At the same time, a bolt of lightning struck the stone axe. The stone axe split open, and an axe that was shining with treasure light appeared in Yili's hand. Boom! The genetic warriors, led by the old man in traditional Chinese attire, took 3 steps back. At this moment, there were no words that could describe their fear. They looked at Yili's figure in shock. He was really like a demon lord descending from the sky, like a god in the mortal world. Now all the 3 Pangu axe fragments had been found. Yili opened the synthesis grid and placed the 3 pieces of Pangu axe into it. Then he began to synthesize. In the end, one of the 10 great divine weapons, the Pangu axe, appeared in Yili's hand. Yili looked at the treasure light in his hand and a playful smile appeared on his handsome face. Without thinking too much, he placed the Pangu axe into the system space. Then he released Ada and Hongya from the system space. "Alda, Hongya, let's split up and look for the other members of the Apocalypse Legion," Yili said to Ada and Hongya. Ada and Hongya nodded and disappeared. Yili looked at the genetic warriors led by the old man in the traditional Chinese suit and realized that they were already frozen like clay sculptures. He had seen this scene countless times, so there was nothing to be surprised about. "Senior, may I know your name?" The old man in the Tang suit looked at Yili in shock. He guessed that the axe in Yili's hand was the shocking spiritual treasure in the mountain, but after witnessing Yili's strength, he definitely did not have any thoughts of snatching it. After the old man finished speaking, he realized that he had said something wrong and hurriedly said, "My name is Qin and am the head of the Qin family in Linjiang City." Yili. Yili spoke slowly. The name Yili was naturally an unfamiliar name to Qin. Chapter 642. How can people like you change B0 Zenvel? Siam, I wonder what realm Senior is in? Qin looked at Yili carefully. Although he knew that he shouldn't ask, he couldn't hold back his curiosity. Yili smiled faintly. "Do you think I need to tell you?" Qin was startled when he heard that. He knew that he had said something wrong. "I'm sorry, Senior. I didn't mean to ask," Qin hurriedly said. He knew that he could not afford to offend someone like Yili. Otherwise, they would all be finished. Yili did not continue to stay on the mountain. He slowly walked down the mountain. The genetic warriors looked at Yili's back in shock. They all gulped. "Patriarch, do you think he can be a transcender?" A Tier 5 evolved being asked in astonishment. After evolved beings came transcender. To them, transcender was like an insurmountable mountain. A bitter smile appeared on Qin's old face. He looked at the sun and muttered, "I didn't expect such a person to come to Linha Base City. I wonder if it's a blessing or a curse." With that, Qin said to the genetic warriors, "Let's go back." Yili arrived at the Linjiang Base City. Not long after he arrived, he was stopped by a group of genetic warriors. There were more than 20 genetic warriors in this group, and they were all rank 3 evolved beings. However, the one leading them was a Tier 5 evolved being. Even with his toes, Yili could tell that these genetic warriors were from the Huang family. "Brat, after injuring our young master, you still dare to brazenly appear on the streets. Are you courting death?" The Tier 5 evolved being looked at Yi Li coldly. The passers-by stopped and watched. They all started discussing. Who is this person? He's actually surrounded by so many Huang family genetic warriors. I don't know, but this person will end up in a terrible state. I know who he is. He's the one who injured Huang Yun. What? Injured Huang Yun? Then this person will probably die. All of a sudden, the passers-by looked at Yi Li with pity. Brat, are you going to surrender yourself or do you want us to take action? The Tier 5 evolved being asked coldly. Yi Li's face was as calm as water. He looked at the Tier 5 evolved being indifferently and slowly said, How can people like you change? As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Li raised his finger. I have a finger that can break the universe. Swish. The power of the One Yang finger was simply terrifying to the extreme. In an instant, the genetic warriors of the Huang family, led by the Tier 5 evolved being, all fell to the ground with their eyes wide open. How is this possible? The passers-by were shocked. They would rather believe that the sky had collapsed than believe that it was true. So many genetic warriors had been instantly killed? Silence, a deadly silence. Yi Li looked at the corpses on the ground indifferently and said slowly, Only death can make you change. With that, Yi Li slowly left. It was already sunset and Yi Li was about to take a walk. Ever since he transmigrated to this world, he had never taken a walk. Taking a stroll could be quite interesting. Senior. Suddenly Yi Li heard a surprised voice. He looked at the girl in front of him. He had met her outside Linhe Bay City. Her name was Qin Wei. Yi Li wasn't familiar with Qin Wei, so he didn't want to bother with her. Senior, don't you remember me? My name is Qin Wei. I'm the leader of the Lightning Zombie Hunting Team. Chapter 643, Coming to the Qin Family B0 Zenvel. Siam. Of course Yi Li remembered Qin Wei. However, he was not familiar with her and did not want to have too much interaction with her. Senior, thank you for last time. Qin Wei looked at Yi Li and said shyly. It doesn't matter. I just did it casually, Yi Li said slowly. Qin Wei was silent for a moment as if she had something difficult to say. A few seconds later, she finally mustered her courage. Senior, can I invite you to my house? Yi Li was stunned. He didn't expect Qin Wei to say such a thing. Was she interested in him and planned to chase him? Then Yi Li secretly shook his head. In this world no one dared to chase him. He thought that since he had nothing to do now, he could go and take a look. Let's go. Yi Li looked at her and said lightly. Qin Wei was surprised when she heard this. She didn't expect Yi Li to agree. She really didn't expect this. Immediately, her fair face couldn't help but reveal a hint of joy. Yi Li followed Qin Wei to the Qin family. Not long after, Yi Li and Qin Wei arrived outside the Qin residence. At the same time in the Huang family. The Huang family head's face was ashen. He even felt that he had misheard. What did you say? They're all dead. In an instant they're all dead. I didn't even have time to see how he attacked. A Tier 5 evolved being looked at Huang Wan and said in horror. Huang Wan was the head of the Huang family, an 8th tier evolved being. At this moment, in the main hail of the Huang family, the elders were also shocked. They would never have thought that there would be such a person in the Linjiang Bay City. Leader, what should we do now? The Tier 5 evolved being asked Huang Wan. Huang Wan pondered for a few seconds and said coldly, as one of the most powerful families in Linjiang Bay City, if we retreat, how can we have a foothold in Linjiang Bay City in the future? I don't believe that he's that powerful. Pass down my order. All the disciples of the Huang family will do their best to find this guy. Yes, family head. The elders in the hall stood up and shouted in unison. Yi Li and Qin Wei walked into the Qin residence. The disciples of the Qin family were all stunned. They didn't know who the person beside Qin Wei was. Why did Sister Wei bring someone back? You don't say. This person is too handsome. I've never seen such a handsome person. That's right. He's too good looking. One wonder how strong he is. Everyone in the Qin family started to discuss Yi Li. When Qin Wei heard the Qin family's words, a hint of fear appeared on her fair face. She had naturally seen Yi Li's strength. After seeing Yi Li's calm face, she heaved a sigh of relief. Who is he? A young girl couldn't help but ask curiously. He's... Qin Wei didn't know how to answer because she still didn't know Yi Li's name. Yi Li. Yi Li said slowly. The name Yi Li was naturally an unfamiliar name to Qin En. At this moment, Qin Yu walked out of a room. When she saw her sister return, her pretty face became very happy. Just as she was about to walk over, she saw the young man beside Qin Wei before she could take a step. This person, Qin Ye's pupils rapidly constricted. Wasn't this the person outside the revolving restaurant that day? Thinking of the scene that day, Qin Yu could not help but feel a lingering fear. That day Huang Yun offended him, but before she could see Yi Li make a move, a shocking bloody hole appeared on Huang Yun's thigh. Chapter 644. The family head called this person Senior B0 CM Yi Li naturally saw Qin Yu. Thinking of how Qin Yu was prepared to use him as a shield that day, he wanted to laugh. The dignified demon king Yi Li was being used as a shield. No one would believe it, right? Yuer. Qin Wei called Qin Yu. Qin Yu originally did not want to walk over, but now that her sister had called her, she could only brace herself and walk over. She did not even dare to look up. Now her face was filled with endless embarrassment. Qin Wei was a little puzzled. Yuer, who was usually mischievous, had suddenly changed. Sister. Qin Yu walked to Qin Wei's side and called out to her softly. Yuer, why do you look unhappy? Qin Wei looked at Qin Yu in confusion. Qin Yu naturally did not want to reveal what happened that day. If that happened, she would be embarrassed to death. At this moment, an old man in a traditional Chinese suit walked in from outside the door. The old man was about 60 years old and had a dignified expression. Grandpa is back, Qin Wei said. The old man in the traditional Chinese attire was none other than the head of the Qin family, the 8th-tier evolved being, Qinen. The disciples of the Qin family hurriedly made way. Qinen was a little puzzled. He did not understand why so many people were standing here. When he saw Qin Wei, he understood everything. Qin Wei was his granddaughter. At the same time, she was also the pride of the Qin clan. She was currently studying at Linha Academy and was indeed a genius among geniuses. However, when he saw Qin Wei, he also saw the young man beside her. Who is this? Qinen took 3 steps back and could not help but be dumbfounded. Back at Linha Mountain, if it wasn't for this youth, he would have already died. Suddenly, Qinen seemed to have thought of something. The head of the Huang family, Huang Wan, asked him to go to the Huang family and told him something that shocked him. He suddenly realized something. Someone who could instantly kill so many genetic warriors of the Huang family, could it be? Is that guy Senior? At the thought of this, Qinen could no longer remain calm. Senior. Qinen came back to his senses and quickly walked to Yi Li and greeted him respectfully. What? All the disciples of the Qin family were shocked. They would never have dreamed that the family head would actually call this person Senior. Who was this person? The family head actually called him Senior. Could it be that this person had a shocking background? The disciples of the Qin family looked at each other. Judging from Yi Li's age, they didn't think Yi Li could be a high-leveled evolved being. However, the family head called him Senior, so there was only one explanation. Yi Li's background was very powerful. Qin Wei and Qin Yu were also very shocked. They did not expect their grandfather to know Yi Li. However, Qin Wei was the most shocked because she had seen Yi Li's strength before. However, she did not think that Yi Li's strength was stronger than her grandfather's. But now her grandfather actually called Yi Li Senior. How could she not be shocked? Senior, did you kill the Huang family's genetic warrior? Qinen looked at Yi Li carefully and asked. They're just some ants. I gave them a chance to live, but they didn't cherish it. It doesn't matter if I kill them, Yi Li said slowly. Qinen remembered that it was Yi Li who did it because only Yi Li had such terrifying strength in the entire Linha Bay city. However, when Yi Li said it himself, he could not help but be shocked. Senior, the head of the Huang family talked to me just now. After pondering for a few seconds, Qinen looked at Yi Li and said. Chapter 645. Everyone in the Qin family was shocked. B0 and Vel. CM. Oh. A hint of playfulness appeared on Yi Li's face. Does the Huang family still want revenge? Yi Li said calmly. Qinen looked at Yi Li's face and couldn't help but sigh. On Linha Mountain, he had seen with his own eyes that the 9th-tier dark race member was instantly killed by Yi Li. He thought that provoking a ferocious god like Yi Li, the Huang family were probably doomed. However, when he was in the Huang family, he had seen a Tier 1 transcender. He did not know who this Tier 1 transcender was, but judging from the tone of the Huang family's head, he seemed to have a good relationship with this Tier 1 transcender. However, a Tier 1 transcender would definitely not be able to kill that dark race member in one hit. After all, that was a 9th-tier dark race member. The disciples of the Qin family looked at each other. Of course, they did not know what grudges Yi Li had with the Huang family. I heard that the young master of the Huang family, Huang Yun, was injured by someone. Could it be? A Qin family disciple suddenly thought of something and could not help but exclaim. When the disciples of the Qin family heard this, they were all shocked. Qin Yu lowered her head deeply because all of this was because of her. Shut up. Qin and glared fiercely at the Qin family disciple who spoke. The Qin family disciple was so frightened that he hurriedly shut his mouth tightly. Senior, what are you going to do now? Qin looked at Yi Li and asked. What else can I do? If they really want to die, then one can only fulfill their wish, Yi Li said slowly. As soon as these words were spoken, the disciples of the Qin family were shocked again. They had never seen such a domineering person. The Huang family was one of the strongest families in Linhe Bay City, but why did it seem like they were nothing in front of this person? Qin and Yi Li had saved his life. He felt the need to tell Yi Li everything he knew. Senior, a Tier 1 transcender has come to the Huang family, Qin said to Yi Li. What? A Tier 1 transcender? To the Qin family, a Tier 1 transcender was an existence that they could not even look up to. They were utterly shocked. Qin Wei looked at Yi Li's face, but she realized that Yi Li's handsome face was calm and nonchalant, as if he did not take a Tier 1 transcender seriously at all. Yi Li smiled faintly and slowly said, It's just a Tier 1 transcender. In my eyes he's just an ant. Silence, a deadly silence. The expressions of the disciples of the Qin family seemed to have frozen. Their eyes were wide open. They could not believe that Yi Li would say such a thing even if they used all their strength. A Tier 1 transcender was an ant. At this moment, there were no words that could describe the shock of the Qin family's disciples. Family head. At this moment, a Qin family disciple ran over. What is it? Qin quickly asked. Someone from the Huang family is here, the Qin family disciple hurriedly replied. Qin's expression changed. He wondered if the Huang family knew that Yi Li was here. Senior, look, Qin looked at Yi Li. He wanted to see how Yi Li was going to deal with it. Yi Li smiled again and said calmly, Since someone is here to die, 111 fulfill their wish. Then Yi Li slowly walked out. Everyone from the Qin family looked at each other before following him out. When they arrived outside the Qin family, they realized that all the elders of the Huang family were present. Chapter 646, Huang family's elders B0s and Vel. The elders of the Huang family were all 7th-tier evolved beings. They looked at Yi Li coldly. You're the one who beat up Xiao Yun and killed our genetic warriors? An elder asked coldly. There was no change in Yi Li's handsome face. He said slowly, Do you want to know why I killed them? Why? The elder asked in a deep voice. Because they don't want to live. I gave them a chance to live but they didn't cherish it, Yi Li said calmly. As soon as these words were spoken, all the elders of the Huang family were shocked. They gritted their teeth. As one of the strongest families in Linhe Bay City, the Huang family had never suffered such humiliation. Brat, but you're going to die soon. An elder said coldly to Yi Li. Yi Li smiled to himself. He didn't understand. He really didn't understand why there were always so many ignorant ants. A mere 7th-tier evolved being actually dared to boast shamelessly in front of him. It was really ridiculous. They'll give you 1 second to disappear. Otherwise you should know the consequences. This is the chance that I, Yi Li, have given you. It's also the only chance, Yi Li said calmly. When the elders of the Huang family heard this, their faces turned green with anger. Suddenly, an elder looked at Qin and Mr. Qin. I didn't expect this guy to be related to your Qin family, the elder said coldly. The Huang family was very influential in Linhe Bay City. The scene of Yi Li and Qin Wei returning to the Qin family was naturally seen by the descendants of the Huang family. Since Qin chose to walk out, it proved that he was on Yi Li's side. He smiled coldly. So what if I am? Do you think my Qin family is afraid of your Huang family? The Qin family and the Huang family were the top 2 big families in Linhe Bay City. On the surface they looked friendly but in fact they all had ulterior motives. Who didn't want to be the number 1 family in Linhe City? When the Huang family elders heard this, their expressions changed. Mr. Qin, you're bringing disaster to your Qin family. An elder of the Huang family said coldly. Ali. All of a sudden, the Huang family elder who spoke let out a blood-curdling scream. Then, his life disappeared from this world forever because there was a shocking bloody hole on his forehead. What? The elders of the Huang family and the Qin family people turned pale with fright. Even in their dreams, they would never have thought that such a scene would happen. I said that I would give you 1 second to disappear. Otherwise, the consequences would be very serious. Why didn't you believe me? Yi Li shook his head and said. The elders of the Huang family were shocked when they heard this. They did not expect Yi Li to do it. An elder of the 8th-tier evolved being was instantly killed just like that, and they did not even see how Yi Li did it. At this moment, the elders of the Huang family finally understood what kind of existence Yi Li was. They all had the same thought in their minds, which was to escape. Unfortunately, Yili gave them a chance to live, but they did not cherish it. If Yili did not kill them, would he still be the Demon King? Yili slowly raised his index finger. On his index finger, white spiritual energy wrapped around it. Suddenly his finger landed. The extremely terrifying white spiritual energy flew towards the elders of the Huang family. The elders of the Huang family widened their eyes. How could they withstand such an attack? All? Then several miserable screams sounded. All the elders of the Huang family fell to the ground with their eyes wide open. Chapter 647. Chapter 647. Because they're all dead at this moment, all the Qin family disciples were frozen like clay sculptures. They dared to swear that what they saw now was the most shocking moment of their lives. Qin Wei and Qin Yu were naturally shocked to the extreme, especially Qin Yu. Her fair face had already frozen. That day, she was prepared to use such an existence as her shield? Qin In, the head of the Qin family, swallowed his saliva. He knew that Yili was very strong, but he did not expect him to be so strong. The 10 elders of the Huang family died instantly. They were all 7th-tier evolved beings. He looked at Yi Li and realized that Yi Li's handsome face was as calm as water, as if he didn't notice anything at all. Qin In had never seen such a person in his life before. Yi Li looked at the sun in the sky. He thought that the Huang family kept coming to find trouble with him. Did they think that he was easy to bully? Since they think that I, Yi Li, am easy to bully, if I don't teach them a lesson, the annoying flies will come again. Immediately, Yi Li activated the swift steps and disappeared. The disciples of the Qin family were shocked. They did not expect Yi Li to suddenly disappear. When Yi Li appeared again, he was already outside the Huang residence. He slowly walked over and 2 Huang family disciples stopped him. These 2 Huang family disciples were both level 9 awakened beings. Although they were as weak as ants, they looked very arrogant. What are you doing? Don't you know that this is the Huang family? A disciple of the Huang family shouted coldly at Yi Li. Yi Li smiled. Huang family? The Huang family won't be here soon. As soon as Yi Li finished speaking, the 2 Huang family disciples fell to the ground. Yi Li's handsome face was still as calm as water. Ever since he transmigrated to this parallel world, he had killed countless people. He slowly walked into the Huang family. The Huang family naturally heard the screams of the 2 Huang family disciples. In an instant, dozens of Huang family disciples surrounded Yi Li. Yi Li had lost count of how many times he had been surrounded. However, the people who surrounded him always ended up badly. The people who surrounded him were no exception. The head of the Huang family, Huang Wan, walked out with a middle-aged man beside him. This middle-aged man carried a saber on his back. This middle-aged man was the Tier 1 transcender that Qin In had mentioned. Haha, there's a path to heaven, but you don't take it. If there is no gate to hell, you force your way in. You actually barged into my Huang family. You're really courting death. Huang Yun laughed out loud as if there was nothing more hilarious than this scene. The head of the Huang family, Huang Wan, stared at Yi Li. It was this person in front of him who caused the Huang family to suffer losses. Huh. Huang Wan suddenly discovered something and was stunned. Where are the elders of my Huang family? He thought that since Yi Li had barged into the Huang family, the elders should be back too. Stop looking. Your elder won't come back, Yi Li said calmly. What do you mean? Huang Yu stared at Yi Li and asked. Yi Li smiled. It's very simple, because they are all dead. What? When the Huang family heard this, they were all flabbergasted. What did you say? Huang Wan stared at Yi Li. Grandpa, he must be lying. The 10 grand elders of my Huang family are all 7th-tier evolved beings. How can they all be dead? Huang Yun said to Huang Wan. Chapter 648. He's just an ant. Huang Wan nodded and looked at Yi Li coldly. What is your purpose in deliberately deceiving me? Yi Li smiled to himself when he heard that. He thought that no one would believe the truth these days. By the way, I still don't know your name? Huang Wan continued. You don't have to know, Yi Li said lightly. Everyone in the Huang family was stunned. They didn't understand what Yi Li meant. What do you mean? Huang Wan stared at Yi Li. Because you're going to die soon, Yi Li said calmly. What? Huang Wan was extremely angry. He had seen arrogant people before, but he had never seen someone as arrogant as Yi Li. Humph. What an arrogant young man. At this moment, the middle-aged man with a knife on his back snorted at Yi Li. The middle-aged man's name was Shi Feng, a Tier 1 transcender. When Huang Wan saw Shi Feng speak, he sneered at Yi Li. If Yi Li knew Shi Feng's background and realm, he would probably be scared out of his wits. Young man, since you're here today, it means that your life will disappear forever. Shifeng looked at Yi Li as if he was announcing Yi Li's death sentence. Yi Li looked at Shifeng indifferently and smiled. Because of an ant like you? What? As soon as these words were spoken, the Huang family couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air and looked at Yi Li with their mouths agape. This was a Tier 1 transcender, yet Yi Li actually called a transcender an ant? How dare you be so arrogant? Do you know who he is? Huang roared furiously. Aren't they ants? Yi Li asked. Shocking, absolutely shocking. Shifeng would never have thought that Yi Li would actually call him an ant. As a Tier 1 transcender, when had anyone ever dared to call him an ant? Ignorant rats. How can you know how high the sky is and how wide the earth is? Shifeng said coldly. Yi Li's handsome face was calm and he said lightly to Shifeng, You're just a Tier 1 transcender, yet you dare to talk about the sky and the earth. What a joke. What? The Huang family would never have thought that Yi Li knew Shifeng's cultivation level. But why? Why wasn't he afraid? Why was he still so calm? Could it be that he had something to rely on? You know that I'm a Tier 1 transcender? Shifeng looked at Yi Li in shock. Yi Li smiled faintly. It's very difficult to see through a Tier 1 transcender? Just an ant. Huang Yun was stunned. How could he have expected Yi Li to know that Mr. Shi was a Tier 1 transcender and still be so arrogant? However, this was the Huang family. Yi Li had no way out. Even if he had extraordinary abilities, he would definitely die today. Thinking back to the day when Yi Li gave him a heart-piercing pain outside the revolving restaurant, Huang Yun couldn't take it anymore. Now that things have come to this, what else do you have to be arrogant about? Today I'm going to let you die without a burial place. Huang Yun roared at Yi Li. Yi Li smiled faintly. There was no change in his handsome face as he looked at Huang Yun. Since you want me, Yi Li, to die without a burial place, I'll destroy your body and soul first. Boom. As soon as he finished speaking, a loud bang entered the ears of the Huang family. Huang Yun's body had already exploded and he died. How was that possible? When the Huang family saw this scene, all of them fell limply to the ground. Chapter 649, From the Four Weapons Hall, Yuner. Huang Wan shouted. Everyone in the Huang family looked at Yi Li in horror. They really didn't expect Huang Yun to suddenly explode and die. Shifeng was also a little shocked. He stared fixedly at the youth in front of him. I want you dead. Huang Wan shouted at Yi Li, attack. Huang Wan roared at the Huang family disciples. Following Huang Wan's order, the disciples of the Huang family started to rush towards Yi Li. Unfortunately, they were too weak and pitiful in front of Yi Li. Yi Li slowly raised his index finger. On his index finger, a shocking white spiritual light wrapped around it. Swish, swish, swish. As countless sounds of wind breaking appeared, screams began to ring out. A tragic scene appeared in front of Yi Li, but there was still no change in his handsome face. In this perilous world, one killed my way out with the blade in my hand. Well, when Huang Wan saw this scene, his pupils shrank rapidly. Dozens of Huang family disciples were finished just like that? Shifeng's eyes could not help but widen. He would never have thought that Yi Li would be so terrifying. Yi Li looked at Huang Wan indifferently and said slowly, How can a person like you change? Only death can change you. He originally didn't want to do this, but the Huang family provoked him time and time again. It wasn't that he didn't give the Huang family a chance, but they didn't cherish such an opportunity. Therefore there was only one outcome for the Huang family, and that was death. When Huang Wan heard this, he could not help but be shocked. All the strength in his body seemed to have been sucked dry by something, and his eyes were filled with shock. He wanted to ask Shifeng for help. He really wanted to ask Shifeng for help, but before he could speak, a terrifying white spiritual light flew towards him. Ali! Huang Wan let out a blood-curdling scream before his life disappeared from this world forever. What? The Tier 1 transcender Shifeng was terrified. When Huang Wan died, he didn't even have time to see that terrifying white spiritual light attack clearly. After all, he was a Tier 1 transcender. It's your turn next. Yi Li looked at Shifeng indifferently. Shifeng calmed himself down and gritted his teeth as he stared at Yi Li. What do you want? Shifeng said coldly. Yi Li thought for a moment, then looked at Shifeng and said, I don't want to do anything. I just want to kill you. Kill me? Shifeng stared at Yi Li. He was from the Broadsword Palace of the Four Weapons Hall. The Four Weapons Hall was a supreme power in the Mystic Land. However, the power of the Four Weapons Hall had been weakened recently because the 12 elders who had gone to the wasteland had all died. One hall master and 12 grand elders had all died in the wasteland, but the other 3 hall masters did not dare to go to the wasteland. There was only one reason, and that was fear. From the 4 weapons hall. Shifeng looked at Yi Li coldly. He knew very well that he was not Yi Li's match because the strength that Yi Li had just displayed was too terrifying. He wanted to use his identity to make Yi Li retreat. After all, the reputation of the 4 weapons hall was known by everyone in the Mystic Land. Unfortunately, Shifeng had overlooked one thing. Yi Li was never afraid of threats. There were many people who threatened him, but they were all dead. Yi Li smiled and looked at Shifeng indifferently. Is the 4 weapons hall very powerful? Chapter 650. The Huang family was gone forever. Shifeng was shocked when he heard this. He looked at Yi Li in shock. Was the 4 weapons hall very powerful? Wasn't this something that everyone in the Mystic Land knew? Could it be that this person was not from the Mystic Land? Who are you? Shifeng stared at Yi Li. Yi Li smiled and said calmly, since you want to know my name so much, 111 tell you. My name is Yi Li. Yi Li? Shifeng had naturally never heard of the name Yi Li. Yi Li, the reputation of the 4 weapons hall is well known in the Mystic Land. If you dare to do anything to me, the 4 weapons hall will definitely not let you off. Shifeng said coldly. Yi Li smiled when he heard that. Why were there always so many ants who wanted to threaten him? He didn't understand. He really didn't understand. I told you the 4 weapons hall is nothing. Why didn't you believe me? Yi Li looked at Shifeng playfully. When Shifeng heard this, he flew into a rage. The 4 weapons hall is not something you punk can insult. Yi Li shook his head slightly. One of their hall masters and their 12 elders all died in my hands. Why can't they be insulted? What did you say? Shifeng's pupils constricted rapidly. He even felt that he had heard it before, but when he saw the indifferent expression on Yi Li's face, he knew that he had not heard wrongly. Now, do you still think that the 4 weapons hall is powerful? Yi Li looked at Shifeng and said calmly. Shifeng was shocked. He couldn't help but take 3 steps back and look at Yi Li in horror. Answer. Yi Li shouted coldly. Hearing this cold shout, Shifeng was so frightened that he collapsed to the ground. You, Shifeng's voice began to tremble. He dared to swear that he had never been so afraid since he was born. How could he have thought that the death of Chengquan Broadsword Master Li Chengquan and the 12 Grand Elders was caused by this person in front of him? Tell me, how do you want to die? Yi Li looked at Shifeng. Shifeng was already scared out of his wits. He stood up from the ground shakily and looked at Yi Li in horror. Suddenly, Shifeng pulled out the golden back mountain chopping saber on his back and pointed it at Yi Li. Yi Li, you. Although Shifeng pointed the golden back mountain chopping saber at Yi Li, his face was still filled with extreme shock. Yi Li shook his head secretly. It seemed that Shifeng was prepared to resist, but of course resistance was useless. Swish. With the sound of a wind-breaking sound, an extremely terrifying white spiritual light attacked. Shifeng's eyes widened. He realized that he could not withstand such an attack at all, even though he was a Tier 1 transcender. I'm done. After Shifeng shouted, his forehead was hit by the white spiritual light attack. A shocking bloody hole appeared on his forehead. His face was filled with unwillingness. He would never have thought that he would die like this. There was no change in Yi Li's handsome face. To him, the Huang family was just an insignificant family. So what if it was destroyed? Then he slowly walked towards the Qin family. Not long after, Yi Li arrived at the Qin family. The disciples of the Qin family immediately surrounded him. The head of the Qin family, Qinan, looked at Yi Li. After a few seconds of silence, he asked, Senior, the Huang family. Before Qinan could finish speaking, Yi Li interrupted him. The Huang family has disappeared forever, Yi Li said slowly. Chapter 651, Chapter 65I, Discovering Yutong's Whereabouts B0xN0VL. Everyone from the Qin family was shocked when they heard this. They looked at Yi Li in shock. The Huang family was one of the strongest families in Linhebei City. Senior, is what you said true? Qinan looked at Yi Li in shock. Yi Li looked at him calmly and said slowly, Do you think he'll lie to you? As soon as he said this, Qinan knew that he had said the wrong thing. Actually, I came back to say goodbye to you guys. I'm leaving soon, Yi Li continued. The disciples of the Qin family were all stunned. They thought that Yi Li would leave, but they did not expect Yi Li to leave now. Qinan knew that it was best not to stop a terrifying existence like Yi Li, otherwise he might offend Yi Li. In that case, take care, Senior, Qinan said respectfully to Yi Li. Yi Li's face was as calm as water. He opened the Point Mall and bought an SS grade skill book. He handed the SS grade skill to Chinen and said calmly, "This is for you." Chinen was stunned. He carefully took the S grade skill from Yi Li's hand and looked at Yi Li tentatively. Before he could speak, Yi Li spoke first. "This is an SS grade skill," Yi Li said slowly. "SS grade skill?" The disciples of the Qin family widened their eyes. It had to be known that their Qin family's most powerful skill was only an S-rank skill. Even so, their Qin family still treated it as a treasure. But senior. However, he just casually gave them an SS grade skill. The disciples of the Qin family could no longer imagine how terrifying Yi Li was. After handing the SS grade skill to Qin, Yi Li activated swift steps and disappeared from the Qin family's courtyard, leaving the Qin family disciples stunned on the spot. Why did Yi Li leave so quickly? This was because Hongye told her telepathically that she had discovered Yutong. Yi Li was very fast. According to the coordinates that Hongye told him, he arrived at an unfamiliar city. This entire area was heavily infected with the zombie virus, and there was no base city here. The city in front of Yi Li was already in a mess. There were ruins everywhere. "Master." Hongye called out to Yi Li and then went to his side. "Hongye, where is Yutong?" Yi Li looked at Hongye and asked. "Master, there is a Lord-level zombie here." "Yutong is the subordinate of this Lord-level zombie," Hongye answered. Yi Li was amused. It was interesting that Yutong was working for a Lord-level zombie. Roar. Roar. Yi Li and Hongye heard the zombie's voice. Hundreds of zombies appeared in front of them. Swish. As the white spiritual light appeared, hundreds of zombies fell to the ground. Yi Li opened the synthesis grid in his mind and synthesized all these zombies. Hee, what a powerful human. Suddenly, a cold voice sounded. Yi Li looked in the direction of the voice and saw a 7th-tier dark race member standing on a tree. This 7th-tier dark race member was a woman. Her face was very exquisite, but there was a large mouth in front of her. Just looking at it made one's scalp tingle. Immediately, this 7th-tier dark race member arrived in front of Yi Li. Hee, I haven't eaten humans for a long time. I didn't expect 2 humans to come knocking on my door all of a sudden. Now I can have a full meal. The 7th-tier female dark race member laughed coldly again. Hongye's aura had already been concealed by Yi Li. This 7th-tier female dark race member naturally couldn't tell that Hongye was a zombie. Chapter 652. Casually killed 2 dark race members B0XN0VL. CM Yi Li smiled and looked at this 7th-tier female dark race member indifferently. "Before you eat us, let me send you somewhere first. What do you think?" The 7th-tier female dark race member was stunned. She looked at Yi Li in confusion. "Where?" "Infernal hell," Yi Li said slowly. As soon as she finished speaking, this 7th-tier female dark race member exploded and died. Yi Li shook his head slightly. There were always so many stupid ants. Roar. Roar. At this moment, zombies' roar sounded in Yi Li's ears again. Hundreds of zombies appeared again. They pounced on Yi Li and Hongye unreasonably. Yi Li thought that there were quite a lot of zombies here. Of course, there was only one outcome for these zombies, which was to be synthesized by Yi Li. In an instant, Yi Li synthesized these zombies. After synthesizing these zombies, Yi Li and Hongye walked slowly on the street. There were still many broken limbs on the street, and the air was slightly foul. "Humans, have you seen Mouth Woman?" An 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead appeared in front of Yi Li and Hongye. Faced with the sudden appearance of the 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead, Yi Li's handsome face did not change at all. He looked at the 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead indifferently. "Is the Mouth Woman you're talking about the one with a big deep mouth?" "That's right," the 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead replied. "She's already dead," Yi Li said slowly. As soon as these words were spoken, the 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead was a little stunned. Then he hurriedly asked, "How did she die?" "Of course I killed her," Yi Li looked at the 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead and said calmly. The 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead stared at Yi Li. It did not expect Yi Li to say such a thing. "You actually dared to kill the Mouth Woman?" The 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead roared angrily. Yi Li smiled faintly. "She's just a 7th-tier dark race. What's the big deal of killing her? What's there to be surprised about?" When the 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead heard this, it could not help but fly into a rage. It shouted angrily, "Since you've killed Mouth Woman, you should die too." As soon as he finished speaking, the 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead pulled out the heavy sword on its back and charged towards Yi Li and Hongye. Swish. Only Hongye's afterimage was left on the spot, followed by the screams of the 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead. Yi looked at the corpse of the 8th tier heavy sword-wielding undead. He thought that there were actually so many dark race members in this unknown city. Could it be that there was a dark race lair here or somewhere? Then he shook his head, thinking that these things had nothing to do with him. The most important thing now was to find Yutong. He opened his heavenly spirit eyes to check, but he did not find Yutong. Although Hongye discovered that Yutong was in this city, Yutong wasn't fixed in one place, so Hongye didn't know where she was. Yi and Hongye started looking for Yutong. During this time he synthesized many zombies. In the end he found Yutong in an amusement park. Yutong sat alone in a corner. Her cute face was blank. This was not Yutong's complete body. At this moment, there were countless zombies in the amusement park. There was a Lord-level zombie standing in an abandoned car. The surrounding zombies all worshipped this Lord-level zombie. Roar! Roar! Chapter 653. A 10th tier Lord-level zombie B0XN0VL. CM Yi looked at the Lord-level zombie in the abandoned car. This Lord-level zombie was like an emperor. He seemed to be enjoying it. Yi thought that let me send you to hell. Then Yi activated swift steps and disappeared on the spot. When he arrived at the amusement park, the zombies in the amusement park were still worshipping the zombie in the abandoned car. Then Yi leaped up and quickly walked on the heads of these zombies. This move was called Swallow's 3 Plunders of Water. It was a superb visual experience. The Lord-level zombie in the abandoned car was stunned. He rubbed his eyes. He would never have thought that this would happen. Human. The Lord-level zombie cried out in shock. At this moment the zombies had already discovered Yi. They started moving, but unfortunately they couldn't touch Yi. In the blink of an eye, Yi had already arrived at the abandoned car. Human, you are very bold. The Lord-level zombie looked at Yi coldly. Yi smiled and said calmly, "You're just a Lord-level zombie. How dare you say such things to me, Yi?" The Lord-level zombie was stunned. He never dreamed that the human in front of him could be so fearless at a time like this. Human, are you not afraid of death? The Lord-level zombie looked at Yi with confusion. At his level, biting humans was no longer attractive to him, just like zombies did not need to suck human blood. Death? Do you think you're worthy of letting me, Yi, die? Yi felt that he had heard the funniest joke in history. He really didn't know what this Lord-level zombie was thinking. It actually wanted him to die. Hearing that, the Lord-level zombie in the abandoned car couldn't help but fly into a rage. Human, since you insist on courting death, I'll fulfill your wish. Roar. The Lord-level zombie roared, then pounced on Yi at lightning speed. Yi smiled faintly. There was no change in his handsome face at all. It was as if he didn't see the Lord-level zombie pounce on him at all. Just as the Lord-level zombie was only a line away from Yi threw a punch. This punch might not be very powerful for a high-level chosen one, but for this 10th tier Lord-level zombie, it was like a cannon blast. Boom. How could the 10th tier Lord-level zombie dodge Yi's punch? It was immediately hit. As Yi punched the body of the 10th tier Lord-level zombie, its body had already been pierced by Yi's fist. Roar. Roar. The surrounding zombies began to roar crazily. They began to crawl toward the abandoned car. Yutong was now the subordinate of this 10th tier Lord-level zombie, so she was naturally among the zombies. Just as the zombies were about to climb into the abandoned car, another zombie suddenly appeared in the abandoned car. This zombie was a female zombie. She was dressed in red, and her fair face was filled with coldness. The female zombie was none other than the Tier 1 Lord-level zombie, the ice zombie, Hongye. Hongye struck out with her palm, and those zombies were instantly sent flying. Yi leisurely opened the synthesis grid in his mind and began to synthesize these zombies. Not long after, these zombies were all synthesized. There were many zombies. And Yi managed to synthesize a S-tier master-level zombie. Chapter 654. Yutong in her complete form B0XN0VL. Zimding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a chance to draw the lottery. At this moment, the system's voice resounded in Yi's mind. Yi thought about how the golden finger always came so easily. Without much thought, he used this chance to draw the lottery. The virtual pointer began to spin on the roulette wheel, and a few seconds later the pointer stopped. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the skill to change the gender of a zombie. The skill to change a zombie's gender, it can change a zombie's gender at will. The same zombie can only be used once. Looking at the introduction of the skill that could change a zombie's gender, Yi revealed a playful smile. To be honest, this skill was a little too heaven-defying. With this skill, he would be able to synthesize zombies with half the effort in the future. For example, the S-tier master level zombie he had just synthesized was a male zombie, but now he could change it into a female zombie. Little Yuju's level was still very low. If he remembered correctly, Little Yuju was only a 5th-tier master level zombie. However, the most important thing now was to turn Yutong into her complete form. Yutong was being held by Hongye, but she didn't seem to want to give up. She bit Hongye's arm with her mouth, but Hongye didn't feel any pain. Yutong's remnant soul was a tier 3 zombie. If she could make Hongye hurt by biting her, then the tier 1 lord level zombie would be too weak. Then Yili activated the soul summoning banner. Soul summoning banner being used, 10%, 30%, 60%, 100%. Yutong's souls and spirits have been gathered. As soon as the system finished speaking, Yutong's 3 souls and 7 spirits appeared in front of Yili. Yili opened the synthesis grid in his mind and started to synthesize Yutong's 3 souls and 7 spirits. A few seconds later, the tier 1 lord level petrified zombie Yutong was synthesized. Brother? Yutong's cute little face was filled with joy. She pounced on Yili. Brother, I thought we would never meet again. Yutong pecked Yili's face. Seeing this, Hongye was a little jealous. She thought that if Yutong could do this, so could she. After pondering for a few seconds, Hongye mustered her courage. She walked to Yili and pecked his cheek too. Yili shook his head slightly. He thought that it was interesting when Yutong and Hongye were acting cute. Brother, where are the other brothers and sisters? Yutong bit her finger and asked Yili in confusion. They haven't been found yet. The Apocalypse Legion will be reunited soon, Yili said to Yutong. After that, Yili looked at the sun in the sky. When he was killing the Master of Darkness, he genuinely integrated the Apocalypse Legion into his body, causing their souls and spirits to fly everywhere. However, he did not regret doing this. There were too many humans in the entire wasteland. If he did not kill the Master of Darkness, he might feel a deep sense of guilt in the future. In the end, he was still a human. Huh? Where are the zombies? Suddenly, a shocked voice entered Yili's ears. Yili looked in the direction of the voice and realized that it was another heavy sword-wielding undead. This heavy sword-wielding undead was also in the 8th tier. After the 8th tier heavy sword-wielding undead finished speaking, he discovered Yili, Hongye, and Yutong. He was stunned. He didn't understand why a zombie was with 2 humans. Hongye's aura was hidden, but Yutong's aura was not. Therefore, this 8th tier heavy sword-wielding undead really could not understand why zombies would stand together with humans. Chapter 655. I don't know where to go, either B0X and 0vil. CM the 8th tier heavy sword-wielding undead walked over and coldly glanced at Yili, Hongye, and Yutong. He didn't know why zombies were with humans, but he knew that none of them were his match. Although the 8th tier heavy sword-wielding undead could tell that Yutong was a zombie, he couldn't tell Yutong's level based on his realm. Where's the zombie lord? The 8th tier heavy sword-wielding undead asked coldly. He didn't think that the 2 humans and 1 zombie in front of him had killed the zombie lord because the zombie lord was a 10th tier zombie and had thousands of zombies under its command. Do I have to tell you? Yili looked at the 8th tier heavy sword-wielding undead indifferently. The 8th tier heavy sword-wielding undead was stunned. It did not expect the human in front of it to say such a thing. Human, do you know what kind of existence you are talking to? The 8th tier heavy sword-wielding undead shouted coldly at Yili. A mere 8th tier dark race member actually dares to speak to me like this. He's really courting death. Yutong's cute little face was filled with extreme disdain. As soon as he finished speaking, Yutong had already attacked. The 8th tier heavy sword-wielding undead widened its eyes. Even in its dreams, it would never have thought that it would not be able to dodge Yutong's attack. Moreover, what was with this power? Ali. The 8th tier heavy sword-wielding undead let out a loud cry, and then its life disappeared from this world forever. Yili's handsome face was as calm as water. To him, an 8th tier heavy sword-wielding undead was a pitifully weak ant. His death naturally could not change the calmness on his face. Let's go. Yili looked at Hongye and Yutong. Ada didn't tell Yili the news about the Apocalypse Legion. Now they could only try their luck and go around. Then Yili, Hongye, and Yutong walked slowly in this messy city. This city was the most miserable city Yili had ever seen. Broken limbs were everywhere. It was a tragic sight. Brother, where are we going now? Yutong shook her cute little head and asked Yili. I don't know. Let's just walk around, Yili said. With their current strength they could go anywhere in the Mystic Land, so they were naturally not afraid. After saying that, Yili hid Yutong's aura. After walking for half a day, Yili activated his heavenly spirit eyes. After probing for a while, he realized that there was actually a village not far ahead. This village was not big. What he did not expect was that there were humans in this village. Let's go somewhere. Yili pointed at the village and said slowly. Hongye and Yutong nodded. Then they walked towards the village not far away. When they arrived at the village, the appearance of the three of them frightened the humans in the village. They had never seen such a good-looking person before, so they all stopped and looked. Who are they? I don't know. They look like genetic warriors. If they're genetic warriors, why can't I detect their auras? Maybe they're powerhouses, that's why they can't detect it. The villagers began to whisper among themselves. Naturally, Yili heard the villagers' discussions. His handsome face didn't waver at all. Who are you? An old man looked at Yili and asked in confusion. Chapter 656. I can cure your grandmother's eyes B0xN0 Sam Yili looked at the old man who spoke. This old man was also a genetic warrior and his level was not low. He was actually a tier 5 evolved being. We are just passing by, Yili said slowly to the old man. The old man wasn't the only genetic warrior in this village. Everyone Yili saw was a genetic warrior. He didn't expect such a genetic warrior village to exist. I believe you are also genetic warriors, right? The old man pondered for a few seconds before looking at Yili and the others. Yili nodded. That's right. Old man, do you know if there are any special zombies around here? As soon as he said that, all the villagers were stunned. Special zombies? What do you mean by special zombies? The old man was puzzled. He didn't know why the young man in front of him asked this question. Well, Yili thought for a moment and continued, for example, a zombie with a sword, a zombie with a spear, a very fair and fat zombie. Hearing that, all the villagers were stunned. Weren't all zombies disgusting? Why were there white and fat zombies? They didn't know. They really didn't know. I've never seen him before. The old man shook his head. Yili came to this village to ask around and also to try his luck. Since these people had never seen him before, he could only give up. However, there's a dark race lair on the Twin Dragon Mountain not far from us, the old man said. Yili smiled to himself. Even if he used his toes to think, he would be able to figure out that the Mouth Woman and the 8th tier heavy sword-wielding undead all came from the nest of the Twin Dragon Mount that the old man mentioned. However, he had nothing to do with the dark race's lair in the Twin Dragon Mount, so he didn't care about these things. Yili looked at the setting sun at the side of the mountain and thought that he would rest here for the night and continue on his way tomorrow. Uncle, can we stay here for the night? Yili asked the old man. The old man hesitated. He didn't know whether Yili's group was good or bad. He was the village chief, so he had to be more vigilant. Are you good or bad people? A little girl looked at Yili and the others curiously. Of course we are good people, Yili said to the little girl. Then, since you're good people, come to my house, the little girl said with a sweet smile. The old man's face darkened. Tianer, don't act on your own. The little girl called Tianer was a little puzzled. She looked at the old man in confusion. Grandpa Gu, they're good people. Yili was amused and thought that Tianer was interesting. She looked like she was only 7 or 8 years old. The old man didn't know what to say. If he directly said that he didn't believe that Yili and the rest were good people, it might offend Yili and the rest. After all, he didn't know what realm Yili and the others were in. If they were a terrifying existence, their village would be finished. Well, Tianer smiled again. Seniors, my family only has me and my grandmother. However, my grandmother is blind. It's enough for you to stay. At the mention of her grandmother, Tianer's cute little face became a little sad. Is your grandma blind? Yili looked at Tianer. Yes, senior. Tianer was a little puzzled, not understanding why Yili would ask such a question. One can cure your grandma's eyes, Yili said slowly. Chapter 657. Senior is really a god B0xN0 Veal. CM when Yili said this, not only Tianer, but all the villagers were shocked. Senior, can you really cure my grandma's eyes? Tianer's eyes were filled with hope. Of course. Yili nodded. The villagers looked at each other and looked at Yili in disbelief. To them Yili was just bragging. How could he cure that? Seniors, come with me, Tianer said. Then Yili, Hongye and Yutong followed Tianer to her house. When they arrived at Tianer's house, Yili looked at the old woman sitting on the chair. The old woman looked to be in her 60s and there were traces of time on her face. Grandma, I'm back. Sweetie ran to her grandmother's side. After her grandmother touched it a few times, she finally touched Tianer's little head. Tianer, Did you cultivate well today? Her grandmother asked Tiana. Of course. Tiana works very hard every day, Tiana said with a smile. By the way, Grandma Senior said that it can cure your eyes, Tiana continued. When Tiana's grandma heard this, the smile on her face instantly froze. But then she shook her head. That's impossible. My eyes can't be cured. Tiana turned around and looked at Yili. She realized that Yili was looking at her indifferently. The villagers followed him. They wanted to see what Yili was up to. Although they guessed that Yili was bragging, they also wanted to see how capable he was. However, Yili slowly raised his palm and a gentle white spiritual light slowly emitted from his hand. The white spiritual light went towards Tiana's grandma's eyes. In an instant, a strange light began to appear in Tiana's grandma's eyes. All the villagers were stunned. They had never seen white spiritual energy before. Suddenly, Tiana's grandma stood up from her chair. Her face was filled with shock. Grandma, what's wrong? Tiana quickly asked. 1111 can see. Tiana's grandma's voice was trembling. What? When the villagers heard this, they were all dumbfounded. Tiana's grandma touched Tiana's cute face, and tears started to flow down her face. One could imagine how excited a blind person would be to suddenly be able to see. Grandma, can you really see? Tiana was still in a daze. After receiving an affirmative answer, Tiana became overjoyed. The villagers sucked in a breath of cold air because they could not believe it no matter what. They originally thought that Yili was bragging, but what happened to their eyes told them that not only were they wrong, but they were also completely wrong. Grandma, it was Senior who cured your eyes. Tiana looked at Yili and said. When Tiana's grandma heard this, she prepared to kneel down in front of Yili. It was a pity that Yili didn't like others kneeling to him. When Tiana's grandma was still a step away from the ground, she felt a resistance that made her unable to kneel down no matter what. We just want to stay the night. With that, Yili yawned and a lazy look appeared on his handsome face. Tiana, quickly bring the seniors to their rooms, Tiana's grandma hurriedly said. Then Tiana brought Yili and the rest to their room. The villagers looked at the backs of Yili and the others in dismay. They were already shocked to the extreme. Senior, you're really a god, the old man said. Chapter 658. You're about to die B0xN0VL. CM, Zombie Treasure Chest X2. The next day, the system's prompt appeared in Yili's mind right on time. Yili opened the zombie treasure chest. Obtained 1,200 gene points, 1,200 strength points, 1,200 speed points, and 1,200 defense points. Obtained 10 Formation Heaven Sword Technique. Yili integrated the attribute points into his body and checked the skill introduction of the 10 Formation Heaven Sword Technique. 10 Formation Heaven Sword Technique. Heaven Grade Skill. Once used, the 10 Great Sword formations would suppress everything. Ding. Host, do you want to cultivate the 10 Formation Heaven Sword Technique? Yes. Begin to cultivating the 10 Formation Heaven Sword Technique. 10%, 30%, 60%, 100%. I've successfully cultivated the 10 Formation Heaven Sword Technique. There was no change in Yili's handsome face at all. It was just a heaven grade skill. He was now a man who could use the divine level skill, the Heaven Severing Sword. Senior. Suddenly there was a knock on the door and Tiana's panicked voice rang. Yili opened the door and found that Hongya and Yutong had already appeared beside Tiana. Senior, there are many dark race members outside the village. Please save us. Tiana looked at Yili pleadingly. Yili activated his heavenly spirit eyes to take a look and realized that there were indeed many dark race members outside the village. They were all above the 6th tier. Then Yili used swift steps and arrived outside the village in an instant. At this moment, the villagers were confronting the 20 or so dark race members in front of them. Speak. Did you kill the mouth woman and the 2 heavy sword-wielding undead? An 8th tier spirit soul looked at the villagers coldly and said, What mouth woman and heavy sword-wielding undead? We've never seen them before. The village chief glared at the 20 or so dark race members in front of him. The villagers were all shocked. The aura emitted from the bodies of the dark race members in front of them was too terrifying. It doesn't matter. Whether you did it or not, you're all going to die anyway. The 8th tier spirit soul smiled coldly and prepared to give the order. But before he could say anything, a handsome young man stood in front of him. The young man slowly said, I killed the mouth woman, and I also killed the 2 heavy sword-wielding undead. As soon as these words were spoken, not only the dark race members, but even the villagers were stunned. Human, you are very courageous. The 8th tier spirit soul stared at Yili. Yili smiled faintly. I don't understand, one really don't understand. He stopped talking. A few seconds later, he continued, I really don't understand why ants like you dare to appear in front of me, Yili. What? Upon hearing this, the 20 or so dark race members all sucked in a breath of cold air. Their dark cave was an invincible existence within a radius of thousands of kilometers. No one had ever dared to speak to them like this. Human, you, what did you say? The 8th tier spirit soul's eyes widened. He even felt that he had heard wrongly. The villagers were also shocked. They swallowed their saliva and looked at Yili. They realized that there was intimidating killing intent in the corners of Yili's eyes. Yili smiled again and looked indifferently at the 8th tier spirit soul. I said, you're going to die soon. As soon as he finished speaking, he had already attacked. Swish, swish, swish. Dozens of white spiritual lights shot out, and more than 20 dark race members turned into nothingness. How could this be possible? All the villagers widened their eyes. They thought that Yili was very powerful, but they didn't expect him to be so terrifying. Chapter 659, Dark Cave, Twin Dragon Mount B0XN0VL. The villagers dared to swear that this was definitely the most shocking thing they had ever experienced since they were born. More than 20 dark race members melted into nothingness, not even their corpses were left behind. They could no longer imagine Yili's realm. Of course, Yili's handsome face didn't show any change in expression. To him, more than 20 dark race members were simply too weak. At this moment, Hongye, Yutong, and Tiana arrived. Tiana was stunned. There were still many dark race members here just now. Why did all of them suddenly disappear? Our village will never forget Senior's kindness. After saying that, the villagers prepared to kneel down to Yili. However, just like Tiana's grandma, just as they were about to kneel down, their legs felt resistance. No matter what, they could not kneel down. I was the one who killed the mouth woman and the heavy sword-wielding undead, so they came to find me. You don't have to kneel, Yili said slowly. Even so, the villagers still looked at Yili gratefully. If it wasn't for Yili, they would all be finished now. By the way, where is the Twin Dragon Mount? Yili suddenly asked. As soon as he said this, the villagers couldn't help but tremble. They naturally knew that Yili was going to attack the dark cave on the Twin Dragon Mount. Senior, if you want to go to the Twin Dragon Mount, I can bring you there, Tiana said to Yili. After Yili cured her grandmother's eyes yesterday, she admired Yili from the bottom of her heart. She even admired him to the point of prostrating herself on the ground. All right. Yili thought for a moment and said, Twin Dragon Mount. It was the most terrifying mountain within 1,000 miles, and all human factions within 1,000 miles regarded this place as the forbidden zones of life. It was for no other reason than the fact that there was the Dark Cave on Twin Dragon Mountain. In the Dark Cave, there were hundreds of powerful Dark Race members led by a Red Bull. This group of Dark Race members committed all kinds of evil deeds. The human forces were terrified even by the sound of their names. It couldn't be helped. The other party was too powerful. Senior, that's the Dark Cave, Tiana said to Yili. Yili looked in the direction of Tiana's finger. There was a huge hole more than 1,000 meters away. The big hole was filled with an evil aura. The group of people stopped in their tracks. Yili looked at the dark hole indifferently. Ants of the Dark Cave, I Yili have arrived. Come out and accept your death. His voice carried spiritual energy and spread far and wide, striking the hearts of the Dark Race members in the Dark Cave. Not long after, a large group of Dark Race members flew, crawled or walked out from the Dark Cave. A Tier 1 Master-level Dark Race member appeared in front of the Dark Race members. It was a crimson Red Bull that was 20 feet tall. It had a pair of towering horns and a huge axe in its hand. Ha ha ha. Suddenly, this Tier 1 Master-level Red Bull laughed loudly, as if it had seen the funniest joke in the world. Afterwards, the hundreds of Dark Race members behind the Tier 1 Master-level Red Bull all laughed as well, although they did not know what their leader was laughing about. When Tiana saw this scene, she was frightened and quickly hid behind Yili. After the Tier 1 Master-level Red Bull laughed, he looked coldly at Yili. Human, did you just ask all of us to come out and die? The Dark Race members behind the Tier 1 Master-level Red Bull all looked at Yili playfully. They had seen quite a few humans before. But to be honest, they had never seen such a funny human before. Chapter 660. Fear of the Dark Race members B0XN0VL. Yili's face was as calm as water. He looked at the Dark Race in front of him indifferently. Is it strange? As soon as these words were spoken, the leader of the Dark Cave, the Red Bull, was furious. Human, do you know that you're about to die? The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull didn't understand. He really didn't understand why this human's face could still be as calm as water at a time like this. Oh. Yili smiled. Can ants like you kill me? What did you say? The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull glared at Yili. Hundreds of Dark Race members were also furious. They originally thought that Yili was an extremely ridiculous human, but who would have thought that this human in front of them actually felt so good about himself? Aren't you all just a bunch of ants? Yili looked at the Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull and said lightly, Skeleton, kill them for me. The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull shouted coldly and angrily. As soon as he finished speaking, a Level 9 heavy sword-wielding undead flew towards Yili and the others. As it came over, the Level 9 heavy sword-wielding undead pulled out the heavy sword behind it. Not far away from Yili's group, the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead jumped up, raised its heavy sword and slashed down. Regardless of whether it was the Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull or the hundreds of Dark Race members behind the Red Bull, they all knew that once the heavy sword-wielding undead struck down, the lives of these humans would disappear from this world forever. The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull laughed coldly. He saw that the few humans in front of him had no intention of dodging at all, and thought that these humans must have been scared silly. The heavy sword in the Level 9 heavy sword-wielding undead's hand was getting closer and closer to Yili, but Yili and the others still had no intention of dodging. On the other hand, Tiana was so frightened that her face turned pale. However, when she saw that Yili did not look frightened at all, she was not prepared to run away. Boom! A violent earthquake sounded, and the surrounding dust filled the sky, making it impossible to see what was going on. When the dust settled, an extremely terrified voice sounded. That's impossible. Absolutely impossible. Of course, the terrified voice came from the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead. The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull and several hundred Dark Race members naturally didn't know why a Tier 9 heavy sword-wielding undead would make such a terrified sound. However, when they took a closer look, they could not help but take 3 steps back. How is this possible? The pupils of all the Dark Race members constricted rapidly. They saw the most impossible scene in history. Yili was holding the heavy sword of the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead, and his hand didn't show any signs of injury. The 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead looked at Yili in shock. He would never have thought that his heavy sword would be caught by this person in front of him with bare hands. Receiving a white blade with bare hands. It had to be known that this was the heavy sword of a Level 9 heavy sword-wielding undead. If they knew that Yili was a Tier 4 chosen one, they would not be so shocked. Unfortunately, they would never have the chance to find out. Crack. Yili's palm moved slightly, and the heavy sword-wielding undead's heavy sword broke into pieces and turned into dust. This. When the Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull and hundreds of Dark Race members saw this, they all couldn't help but freeze as if they were petrified. Chapter 661. Come here and let me kill you B0xN0 Veal. CM. The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull and hundreds of Dark Race members fell to the ground in shock. Even in their dreams, they would never have imagined that such a scene would actually appear. The 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead did not have eyes. If it did, its eyes would definitely widen to the largest size in history. Its heavy sword was actually broken by the human in front of it just with a gentle twist. Are you very shocked? Yili looked at the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead indifferently. The Level 9 skeleton undead was shocked and looked at Yili in horror. Actually, you don't need to be shocked at all because you're going to die soon, Yili continued. As soon as he finished speaking, the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead was terrified. It wanted to escape, it really wanted to escape. Unfortunately, how could it escape from Yili's grasp? Yili casually threw a punch at the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead. The skeleton undead was instantly pierced through. Silence, a deadly silence. The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull and several hundred Dark Race members' eyes were wide open, all of them frozen on the spot like clay sculptures. The 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead died just like that? One had to know that this was a 9th tier skeleton undead. Yili's face was still as calm as water, as if nothing had happened at all. Human, who exactly are you? The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull glared at Yili. The person who killed you, Yili said slowly. As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of the Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull and hundreds of Dark Race members all turned cold. Although the strength Yili displayed was very terrifying, their overall strength was not something these few humans in front of them could compare to. Human, don't be too arrogant. The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull's expression was terrifyingly cold. He had seen many humans and he had also seen many arrogant humans, but he had never seen anyone as arrogant as Yi Li. Ants like you who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Even if I, Yi Li, am arrogant, what can you do? Yi Li smiled faintly. When the Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull and the hundreds of Dark Race members heard this, their eyes widened in anger. Come over. Let me kill all of you. Don't ever choose to resist me, Yi Li said leisurely to the Dark Race members in front of him. The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull flew into a rage. This was an unprecedented rage from its birth until now. Human, one admire you very much. I really admire you. You actually want to challenge our dark cave with just the few of you. Do you know that in an instant our dark cave can crush you into pieces? Although the Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull really wanted to kill Yi Li, he really wanted to understand what this human in front of him relied on to be so arrogant. Do you always talk so much nonsense? Yi Li looked indifferently at the Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull. When the Red Bull heard this, it could no longer suppress the anger in its heart. Kill them all. The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull roared. Following the order of the Red Bull, hundreds of Dark Race members all rushed towards Yi Li and his group. Tiana had never seen such a scene before. She was so frightened that she almost fell to the ground. There was still no change in Yi Li's handsome face. He looked indifferently at the hundreds of Dark Race members attacking him and slowly said, "There's no need for me to personally kill you." Chapter 662, The Death of the Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull B0XN0VL. As soon as he finished speaking, Hongye and Yutong flew out, leaving only an afterimage on the spot. Their speed was so fast that it was shocking. Hongye and Yutong were both Tier 1 Lord level zombies. Destroying these hundreds of Dark Race members would be as easy as flipping their hands. Ah! In an instant, screams sounded one after another. In an instant, countless Dark Race members fell to the ground. The entire scene could only be described as tragic. Well. When the Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull saw this scene, it was scared out of its wits. Its face was full of disbelief. What kind of terrifying power is this? The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull didn't know, he really didn't know. How did you? The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull opened its eyes even wider because Yi Li had appeared in front of it. Are you scared? Yi Li looked indifferently at the Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull. The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull was naturally afraid. Not only was he afraid, he was also extremely afraid. Now, do you think I, Yi Li, can kill you? Yi Li slowly asked the Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull. How could a Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull dare to speak? Just now, Yi Li was still so far away from him, but in the blink of an eye, Yi Li appeared in front of him. To have such speed, he was definitely a supreme existence among human genetic warriors. The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull looked at the battle situation and realized that it was already over. Hundreds of Dark Race members were almost all killed, and there was only one outcome for him: waiting for death. But the Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull knelt in front of Yi Li with a plop. He used his hand to slap his own face forcefully. My lord, it's my fault. I shouldn't have provoked you. Please spare my life. The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull naturally did not want to die. He still wanted to enjoy his life. Besides, he also knew that as long as there was life, there was hope. Yi Li's face was as calm as water, as if he did not see this Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull kneeling and begging for mercy. How can a Dark Race member like you change? Yi Li asked slowly. The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull was shocked and hurriedly said, Sir, as long as you spare my life, one will definitely be a good member of the Dark Race in the future. The Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull thought that Yi Li wanted to let him go, and a hint of surprise already appeared on its face. Unfortunately, it would never have thought that Yi Li would shake his head and slowly say, No, sparing your life won't change you. Only death will change you. When the Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull heard this, it hurriedly raised its head to look at Yi Li. It discovered that Yi Li had already raised a finger, and a white spiritual light wrapped around the finger. Suddenly his finger landed. Ali! With a blood-curdling scream, the Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull disappeared from this world forever. Yi Li looked indifferently at the corpse of the Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull. He shook his head slightly. In the wild, good people don't die. Bad people don't die. There's only one kind of people who do, and that's stupid people. In Yi Li's opinion, in the post-apocalyptic world, there was no substantial difference between humans and the Dark Race. They were both smart and stupid ones. Obviously, a Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull was a stupid person, which was why he died. When the Tier 1 Master Level Red Bull died, Hongye and Yutong had already killed hundreds of Dark Race members. The entire scene had already turned into a river of blood. Chapter 663. Can you take Tiana out to see this world? B0xN0 Vel. CM Yili walked slowly to Hongye and Yutong. Yutong smiled at Yili. Brother, these dark race members are really trash. That's right. They are not even worth my effort. Hongye continued. Yili smiled calmly. He looked at Tiana, who was not far away. At this moment, Tiana was already scared out of her wits. She had never seen such a terrifying scene and was so scared that she could not even speak. Let's go, Yili said slowly. Then the group of people headed towards the ancient village. Not long after, they arrived at the ancient village. The villagers quickly surrounded him. The village chief looked at Yili and said, Senior, one don't know. Before the village chief could speak, Yutong interrupted him. Grandpa village chief, the seniors are too powerful. I didn't even have time to see clearly before all the dark race members from the dark cave died, Tiana said with lingering fear. What? When the villagers of the ancient village heard this, they were all dumbfounded. There's nothing to be surprised about. In my eyes, those dark race members are weaker than ants, Yili said calmly. When the villagers heard this, they looked at each other. Recalling the scene where Yili instantly killed more than 20 dark race members at the village entrance, they knew that Yili wasn't lying at all. Oh right, we're leaving, Yili said to the village chief. When the villagers of the ancient village heard this, they were all stunned. It was obvious that they did not expect Yili to suddenly say this. Senior, can you grant me a request? The village chief looked at Yili in embarrassment. What request? The village chief hesitated for a few seconds. Then he mustered his courage and said to Yili, Can you let Tiana go out with you to see this world? That's right, Senior. After all, this is a small village. Tiana has no future here, Tiana's grandmother also said to Yili. Yili didn't expect the villagers to think this way. He looked at Tiana. To be honest, he quite liked this girl. However, now that he was looking for the Apocalypse Legion, it would be inappropriate to bring Tiana along. Yili was silent for a few seconds. As the saying goes, help others until the end. Yili would do a good deed. He wanted to find a good sect and send Tiana in as the sect master's disciple. All right. Yili agreed. When the villagers heard this, their faces were filled with pleasant surprise. Thank you, Senior. All the villagers of the ancient village said. There was no change in Yili's handsome face. He had seen such gratitude countless times. Yili, Hongye, Yutong, and Tiana came out of the ancient village. Tiana had never been to the outside world and was very curious about everything. These places were also unfamiliar to Yili. He did not know if there were any good sects here. Yili looked at the endless wilderness in front of him. There were zombies and ferocious beasts everywhere. Currently, he was not very interested in the synthesized zombies. He just wanted to find all the zombies of the Apocalypse Legion back. He wasn't worried about Ada's safety. Aldo was a 5th-tier Lord-level zombie with unparalleled strength. He wouldn't be afraid of anything. Yili placed Hongye, Yutong, and Tiana into the system space. He activated swift steps and began to fly up and down. Chapter 664. Zombie with Water and Fire Merciless Spear B0xN0 Veal. CM Yili activated the swift steps and walked for thousands of miles, arriving at a huge mountain. This mountain was filled with tombs. It was enough to make one's scalp tingle. Ali! Zombies! Zombies! Suddenly, a girl's scream entered Yili's ears. Yili looked in the direction of the voice and saw a few Tier 3 evolved beings being chased by hundreds of zombies. These zombies were not low-leveled. They were all level 10 zombies, and there were even a few mutant zombies. The leading zombie had even reached the 3rd tier. Actually, the 5 Tier 3 evolved beings who were fleeing frantically had the ability to fight. Unfortunately, they were like flowers in a greenhouse and didn't dare to fight the zombies. The 5 Tier 3 evolved beings all noticed Yili's group. Their eyes lit up. They thought that those who could appear here must be high-leveled evolved beings, so they rushed towards Yili. Senior, save us! A girl shouted at Yili. Yili ignored them as if he didn't see them at all. They had nothing to do with him. Although the 5 Tier 3 evolved beings could tell that Yili had no intention of saving them, they still ran behind Yili. Yili had seen people with thick skin, but he had never seen someone with such thick skin. He smiled faintly, thinking that this was interesting. At this moment, the 5 Tier 3 evolved beings had all run behind Yili. The zombies had already rushed over. Roar! Roar! The 5 Tier 3 evolved beings widened their eyes in shock. How is this possible? In the next second, all the 5 Tier 3 evolved beings sucked in a breath of cold air because the hundreds of zombies had turned into one. Their eyes widened for the largest time in history. and they saw a scene that could never happen. How could hundreds of zombies suddenly become one zombie? No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't figure out why this happened. They could only look at the only zombie left in front of them in a daze. But in the next second they were even more shocked. Because the zombie in front of him was gone too. What the hell is going on? A 17 or 18-year-old girl cried out in horror. What happened? Of course, Yili wouldn't tell them that he had put the zombie into the system space. Senior, it's you? The Tier 3 evolved being girl looked at Yili carefully. Yili really did not want to have any interactions with these Tier 3 evolved beings. Leave. Yili replied slowly. What? The 5 Tier 3 evolved beings did not expect Yili to suddenly say this. They all looked at Yili in a daze. I said leave. Otherwise you're going to die soon. Yili glanced at the 5 Tier 3 evolved beings. When the 5 Tier 3 evolved beings heard this, they were scared out of their wits and quickly fled. All? Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream came from the direction where the 5 Tier 3 evolved beings fled. Yili looked over and saw a 5th tier zombie holding a water and fire merciless spear. In an instant, this zombie killed 4 Tier 3 evolved beings, leaving only the girl. Upon seeing this, Yili's face showed a playful look. The zombie with the water and fire merciless spear was none other than Long Yu, the spear-wielding zombie of the Apocalypse Legion. The girl ran back behind Yili and looked at the attacking zombies in horror. Chapter 665. I'm not afraid of being bitten by zombies. B0xN0 Veal. Siam, the girl had never seen such a zombie before. He held such a terrifying spear and killed her 4 good friends in an instant. Long Yu flew over with the water and fire merciless spear in hand. He was a famous ancient general to begin with, and his armor made him look quite domineering. As the saying went, one will search high and low only to find it when one least expects to. The girl widened her eyes. She didn't understand why Yili didn't dodge at all and didn't look defensive at all. Hongye and Yutong were overjoyed. Tiana was a little curious. She didn't understand why there was such a domineering zombie. However, Long Yu's water and fire merciless spear was only a line away from Yili, but Yili still had no intention of dodging or defending. The girl had already closed her eyes. Of course she knew what happened to Yili. Clang. Suddenly the girl heard the sound of steel colliding. The girl didn't understand why she heard such a sound. She quickly opened her eyes, but what happened next made her collapse to the ground. The water and fire merciless spear impartially pierced Yili's body, but it did not pierce through. Well, the expression on the girl's fair face seemed to have frozen. This was the most shocking thing she had ever experienced since she was born. Yili's current defense was equivalent to the Golden Bell Shield and Iron Skin technique in martial arts novels. Then Yili quickly reached out and placed his hand on Long Yu's neck. Long Yu was only a remnant soul now. He was just a 5th tier zombie. What Yili didn't expect was that Long Yu still wanted to resist. He threw away the water and fire merciless spear and bit Yili's hand. When the girl saw this, she was shocked. Ali. As a little girl, she naturally hadn't experienced much. When she saw Yili being bitten by a zombie, she was scared because the humans who were bitten by the zombie would undoubtedly become zombies. Tiana was no exception. She looked at Yili in shock. Senior, you were bitten by a zombie. The girl and Tiana looked at Yili and realized that there was no change in Yili's handsome face at all. It was as if nothing had happened. Yili placed Long Yu in the system space and smiled faintly. The girl was stunned. She swore she was really stunned. He could still smile after being bitten by a zombie. This. Senior, people who are bitten by zombies will also become zombies. Tiana looked at Yili in shock. Tiana, do you really think that the zombie virus can harm me? Yili looked at Tiana indifferently. Tiana and the girl were shocked. The girl looked at Yili in shock. She wondered if the man in front of her was not afraid of being bitten by zombies. Tiana, brother's ability is beyond your imagination, Yutong said as she stroked Tiana's head. Yutong and Tiana were about the same age and seemed to get along very well. As senior, thank you for saving my life. The girl swallowed her saliva and said to Yili. Yili looked indifferently at the beautiful girl in front of him. I never thought of saving you. It's just that you shamelessly hid behind me, Yili said slowly. The girl's fair face looked extremely embarrassed when she heard this. She even wanted to find a hole to hide in. Yili ignored the girl and started to use the soul summoning banner. Ding. Soul summoning banner being used, 10%, 30%, 60%, 100%. Zombie Long Yu's soul has returned. As soon as the system finished speaking, Long Ye's soul appeared in front of Yili. Chapter 666. Go to the Mystic Pavilion B0XN0VL. CM the girl and Tiana looked at the zombie that suddenly appeared, and it looked exactly the same as the zombie holding the water and fire merciless spear just now. How is this possible? The girl had thought that it was the most shocking moment in her life, but now she realized that not only was she wrong, but she was so completely wrong. Yili naturally ignored the girl's shock. He opened the synthesis grid in his mind and began to synthesize Long Ye's 3 souls and 7 spirits. A few seconds later, the complete Long Yu appeared in front of him. Long Yu. Long Yu. Hongye and Yutong shouted at Long Yu in unison. Long Yu seemed to be a little stunned. Hongye Yutong? A master? Long Ye's pupils constricted rapidly with disbelief on his face. When Tiana and the girl saw this, they were so shocked that they took a few steps back. A zombie called Senior Master? Even if they racked their brains, they couldn't figure out why the zombie called Yili its master. Tiana, sister, don't be surprised. We're all zombies from the Apocalypse Legion. Yutong smiled at Tiana and the girl. WH what? The girl's eyes widened a little. She looked at Hongye and Yutong in a daze. She couldn't believe it. She really couldn't believe that Hongye and Yutong were zombies. Long Yu, where's your weapon? Yili looked at Long Yu playfully. Long Yu was stunned. He looked at his hand and realized that the water and fire merciless spear was not in his hand. He looked around and realized that the water and fire merciless spear was on the ground. He hurriedly picked it up. The girl's entire body was already drenched in cold sweat. A chill rushed from her tailbone to the top of her head. She looked at Yili in horror. You're from the dark race. Hearing the girl's question, Yili smiled calmly. He couldn't remember how long it had been since anyone called him a member of the dark race. He really missed the past. Are you from a base city? Yili looked at the girl. The girl was stunned. She didn't expect Yili to answer her like this. I am a disciple of Mystic Pavilion, the girl answered Yili in shock. Yili nodded. He had never heard of the Mystic Pavilion before. What kind of sect is the Mystic Pavilion? Yili asked the girl. The Mystic Pavilion is one of the 5 major sects in the Mystic Land, the girl replied. When Yili heard the girl's words, he secretly smiled. Since they were fated to meet, he would send Tiana to the Mystic Pavilion. Lead the way, Yili said slowly to the girl. The girl was shocked. Go, where are we going? Mystic Pavilion. Yili enunciated each word without any hesitation. As soon as these words were spoken, the girl could not help but tremble. From the bottom of her heart, she was certain that Yili was a member of the dark race because he could control zombies. However, no matter how hard she thought about it, she couldn't figure out why Yili left the Mystic Pavilion. Could it be? The girl suddenly thought of a shocking possibility, which was to occupy the Mystic Pavilion. However, this thought was immediately dispelled by the girl. After all, the Mystic Pavilion was one of the 5 major sects in the Mystic Land. Miss, what's your name? Yutong asked the girl. The girl was shocked again. My name is Yunduo. Yunduo? Sister, your name is so nice, Yutong said with a sweet smile. Yunduo had no choice but to bring Yili and the rest to the Mystic Pavilion. The Mystic Pavilion was not far from where Yili was. In less than an hour's journey, Yili and his group arrived at the Mystic Pavilion. Chapter 667. Who wants to stop me? B0XN0VEL. CM Yili looked at the mountain in front of him. This mountain actually had some dragon and phoenix aura. Wherever there was dragon and phoenix aura, the spiritual energy was very dense. He thought that since it was one of the 5 major sects of the Mystic Land, he could not underestimate it. Let's go up the mountain. Yili looked at Yunduo indifferently. Yunduo was shocked. She had already been sure that Yili was a member of the dark race. She looked at Yili in shock. What are you going to the Mystic Pavilion for? Yunduo mustered her courage and asked Yili. There was no change in Yili's handsome face. He looked calmly at Yunduo and slowly said, Do I need to tell you what I want to do? When Yunduo heard this, her entire body couldn't help but tremble because Yili really looked like a human. Tiana bit her finger and looked at Yili curiously. She didn't understand why Yili brought her here. No, it's not that, senior. I just wanted to ask. Yunduo stammered in panic. You don't need to know this. Let's go up the mountain. Yili looked at Yunduo. When Yunduo heard this, she did not dare to hesitate anymore. She hurriedly brought Yili and Tiana up the mountain. Not long after, Yili saw the door of the Mystic Pavilion. There were a few disciples at the entrance. They were all Tier 4 evolved beings. The Tier 4 evolved beings were all guarding the door, so one could imagine how strong the Mystic Pavilion was. Senior brothers, I'm an outer sect disciple of the Profound Pavilion. This is my token. As she spoke, Yun Duo handed her token as an outer sect disciple to the Tier 4 evolved beings. One of the Tier 4 evolved beings took the token from Yun Duo's hand. After looking at it, he nodded. Go on in. Yun Duo hesitated when she heard this. She turned around slightly and looked at Yili, not knowing what to do. Yili naturally knew what Yun Duo wanted to say. He and Tian'er did not have tokens, but if Yili wanted to go somewhere, why would he need a token? He brought Tian'er and slowly walked in front of a few Tier 4 evolved beings. Where are your tokens? A Tier 4 evolved being said to Yili and Tian'er. No token. Yili shook his head slowly. The Tier 4 evolved beings were all stunned. They would never have thought that Yili would say such a thing. You're not disciples of the Mystic Pavilion? A Tier 4 evolved being looked at Yili in shock. That's right. Yili's handsome face was as calm as water. The Tier 4 evolved beings immediately understood. They thought that Yili and the little girl in front of them wanted to become disciples of the Mystic Pavilion. Unfortunately, now was not the time for Mystic Pavilion to recruit disciples. Since you don't have a token, you naturally can't enter the Mystic Pavilion, a disciple looked at Yili and said. Yili smiled calmly. What if I insist on going in? Silence, a deadly silence. The Tier 4 evolved beings were stunned. They looked Yili up and down and realized that he was too handsome. At the same time, they did not understand why there was such a handsome person in this world. Especially his eyes. They felt that they would never forget such a pair of eyes. His eyes were as serene as the night and as profound as the ocean. However, no one in this world could rely on looks to make a living. Without absolute strength, no matter how handsome he was just someone else's plaything. Thinking of this, the Tier 4 evolved beings all laughed coldly. Brat, do you know what kind of place the Mystic Pavilion is? Do you think you can barge into the Mystic Pavilion? A Tier 4 evolved being looked at Yili with extreme disdain. Chapter 668. Barged into the outer sect of the Mystic Pavilion B0xN0 CM Yili smiled leisurely. He looked at the Tier 4 evolved being in front of him indifferently. I thought you were pitifully stupid, but it seems like you're not that stupid. As soon as he finished speaking, the Tier 4 evolved being who spoke was sent flying. What? The remaining Tier 4 evolved beings turned pale with fright. They did not even see Yili attack. How is this possible? A Tier 4 evolved being asked in shock. Do you really want to stop me? Yili's handsome face was still as calm as water. He looked at the Tier 4 evolved beings in front of him indifferently. These Tier 4 evolved beings were undoubtedly scared out of their wits. They looked at Yili in horror. Do you know how powerful the Mystic Pavilion is? If you barge into the Mystic Pavilion, you will definitely regret it. A Tier 4 evolved being said to Yili. Yun Duo was also stunned. She had guessed that Yili came to the Mystic Pavilion to occupy the Mystic Pavilion, but this guess was later overturned by her. After all, the Mystic Pavilion was too powerful. But now, such a guess could not help but appear in her heart again. Ali. Before Yun Duo could regain her senses, she saw another Tier 4 evolved being flying backward. Her eyes were wide open. She could no longer imagine what level of dark race member Yili was. His strength was too terrifying. Yili looked indifferently at the two Tier 4 evolved beings in front of him. Do you still want to stop me? As soon as he said that, the two Tier 4 evolved beings were so frightened that they collapsed to the ground. They looked at Yili as if they had fallen into an ice cave. How could these two Tier 4 evolved beings speak a complete sentence? Let's go in, Yili said slowly to Yun and Tian'er. When Yun Duo heard this, she came back to her senses and swallowed her saliva. She knew that if she did not go in, the person in front of her would definitely kill her without hesitation. Then Yun Duo brought Yili and Tian'er into the Mystic Pavilion. Quick! Hurry up and report it. A Tier 4 evolved being said in horror. Then a Tier 4 evolved being quickly ran in. Yun Duo brought Yili and Tian'er into a square. There were many disciples in this square. There was no change in Yili's handsome face at all. He could even imagine with his toes that these disciples were all outer sect disciples of the Mystic Pavilion because they were all evolved beings. Senior, this is the outer sect of Mystic Pavilion. Yun Duo looked at Yili fearfully. Yun Duo was only an outer sect disciple of the Mystic Pavilion. Of course, she could only enter the outer sect of the Mystic Pavilion. Suddenly, an old man appeared in front of Yi Li. This old man looked to be around 60 years old, a Tier 1 transcender. Beside this elder was the Tier 4 evolved being who had been standing outside the door. Elder Du, it's them. This Tier 4 evolved being pointed at Yi Li and Tian'er coldly. The outer sect disciples in the square gathered around, not understanding what was going on. The old man's name was Du Li, and he was the grand elder of the outer sect of the Mystic Pavilion. Du Li looked at Yi Li and Tian'er coldly and said coldly, "Are you the ones who barged into the outer sect of the Mystic Pavilion?" As soon as these words were spoken, all the outer sect disciples in the square were dumbfounded. This was because this was the first time they had heard of someone daring to barge into the outer sect of the Mystic Pavilion. Did they eat a bear's heart or a leopard's guts? They actually dared to barge into the outer sect of the Mystic Pavilion. That little girl isn't even 10 years old, right? Moreover, she's only an awakened being. Such a person. However, I can't tell what realm this person is in. He must be very strong. Otherwise, how could he break into the outer sect of the Mystic Pavilion? The disciples in the square began to whisper among themselves. Chapter 669. Ants are ants B0xN0VL. Yi Li looked on indifferently and smiled. However, even if we barge into the outer sect of the Mystic Pavilion, what can you do? What did you say? Du Li stared at Yi Li. The outer sect disciples in the square were also furious. They all stared at Yi Li. "Brat, when you said this, you should have thought of your outcome." Du Li continued. Yi Li smiled faintly. "It's a pity that one can't think of what will happen to me." Yunduo was shocked. She never expected Yi Li to be so fearless in front of Elder Du. "Since you don't know, let me tell you. There's only one word for you and that's death." Du Li gritted his teeth and said, "Do you think you're worthy?" Yi Li's handsome face revealed a playful expression. As soon as these words were spoken, not only Du Li, but all the outer court disciples in the square were furious to the extreme. Elder Du is the grand elder of the outer sect, a Tier 1 transcender. A Tier 4 evolved being said coldly to Yi Li. As soon as he finished speaking, a smug expression immediately appeared on Du Li's old face. In his opinion, this young man in front of him would definitely pee his pants in fear after knowing who he was. He looked at Yi Li's face and was stunned. This was because Yi Li's expression did not change at all, as if nothing had happened. Du Li would never have dreamt that the young man in front of him would turn a blind eye to his identity. Seeing this, he was furious. "You guys barged into the outer sect of the Mystic Pavilion. Ever since the Mystic Pavilion was established, no one has dared to barge in. Do you want to commit suicide or do you want me to kill you?" Du Li stared at Yi Li and Tian'er and said, "Ants are just ants," Yi Li replied, shaking his head gently. "What?" The outer sect disciples in the square were stunned. They could swear that they were really stunned. This person actually dared to call Elder Du an ant? After all, Elder Du was a Tier 1 transcender. Du Li didn't expect Yi Li to be so arrogant. As an outer sect elder of the Mystic Pavilion, he was respected by many people. "You're seeking death." As soon as he finished speaking, Du Li stretched out a large hand. This large hand was condensed from spiritual energy and looked terrifying. However, Yi Li had no intention of dodging and allowed the large hand condensed from spiritual energy to attack him. Du Li looked at Yi Li with a cold smile. He thought that Yi Li was so scared that he didn't even know how to hide. Everyone in the square knew that Yi Li was about to die. There would be no chance of survival for him. The large hand condensed from spiritual energy was only a line away from Yi Li. Without a doubt, the big hand was on Yi Li's body. Unfortunately, there was still no change in Yi Li's expression. It was as if the huge hand formed by spiritual energy did not cause any harm to him. However, Yi Li slowly raised a finger and pointed it at the big hand condensed from spiritual energy. The huge hand condensed from spiritual energy dissipated like a bubble. How was that possible? All the outer sect disciples in the square cried out in surprise. Their eyes were wide open for the largest time in history. Well. Du Li had never encountered such a situation before. He was stunned for a moment. After all, he was the Grand Elder of the Mystic Pavilion's outer sect. As a Tier 1 transcender, he would naturally be the first to regain his senses compared to these outer sect disciples. "I didn't expect you to have some strength." Du Li looked at Yi Li coldly. Chapter 670. Tell your sect master to come and see me B0xN0VL. CM Dooley didn't expect his attack to be so easily neutralized by Yi Li. However, he was someone who had been through a lot. But that's all you've got, isn't it? You should be a body-tempering warrior, right? Dooley stared at Yi Li. As soon as these words were spoken, the outer sect disciples in the square instantly understood. Body-refining warriors had very strong defense. They could use any part of their bodies as a weapon. You really seem to understand. Yi Li smiled faintly. Dooley was stunned. He didn't understand. He really didn't understand how Yi Li could still be so composed even now. I don't have time to talk nonsense with an ant like you. Ask your sect master to come and see me, Yi Li said slowly. Yi Li had come to the Mystic Pavilion to make Tian'er a disciple of the sect master of the Mystic Pavilion. He thought that there should be many genetic warriors in the Mystic Pavilion whose realms were higher than his. However, he did not care. As soon as these words were spoken, not only Dooley, but all the outer sect disciples present were stunned. How could they have expected Yi Li to be arrogant to this extent? Ask the sect master to meet him? Was this still human language? How dare you be so arrogant? Dooley roared. Yi Li sighed secretly. Stop shouting. Have pity on your lungs. Dooley had lived for more than 60 years, but he could swear that this was definitely the angriest he had ever been since he was born. Brat, one wants you dead. As soon as he finished speaking, Dooley flew towards Yi Li at an astonishing speed. Yi Li looked at Dooley calmly and shook his head. He really couldn't figure out why Dooley still dared to attack him. Did he really not know who he was talking to? Yi Li slowly raised a finger and a terrifying white spiritual light wrapped around it. Suddenly his finger landed. A terrifying white spiritual light burst out at lightning speed. When the disciples in the square saw this white spiritual light, they were all shocked. Heaven-defying level genetic warrior. Shock, absolute shock. They had only heard of heaven-defying level genetic warriors in legends. Now that they had really seen one, how could they not be shocked? Dooley looked at the incoming white spiritual light and his pupils couldn't help but constrict because he realized that he couldn't dodge this white spiritual light. Without a doubt, the white spiritual light pierced through Dooley's thigh. Ali! What followed was a series of shocking screams. The outer sect disciples in the square were so frightened that their souls fell to the ground. Their faces were extremely pale. As for Yun Duo, she was even more frightened. Tian'er was also scared out of her wits. She grabbed the corner of Yi Li's shirt tightly. At this moment, no one dared to say anything. They all looked at Yi Li in horror. Yi Li slowly walked towards the spot where Dooley had fallen. His handsome face was calm and composed. Now, can your sect master come and see me? Yi Li looked at Dooley indifferently. Dream on. Dooley gritted his teeth and said. Yi Li smiled. He didn't expect Dooley to have some courage. Swish. With the sound of wind breaking, another bloody hole appeared on Dooley's other leg. When the outer sect disciples in the square saw this scene, they were so frightened that they collapsed to the ground. Chapter 671. Everyone in the square was terrified. B0xN0 Veal. Sam Dooley felt an unprecedented pain. He screamed violently. They'll say it again. Ask your sect master to come and see me. Don't make me say it a third time, Yi Li said slowly. You don't even think about it. Dooley gritted his teeth and shouted coldly again. At this moment, the outer sect disciples in the square were already scared silly. How could they say anything? Yi Li secretly smiled. He didn't understand what Dooley was persevering about. It was indeed useful to persevere, but in front of him, perseverance was useless. Ali. Suddenly, the outer sect's grand elder, Dooley, let out another shocking scream. The scream made everyone's scalps tingle. This was because there was a terrifying bloody hole on his right arm, and blood kept flowing out. What about now? Yi Li looked at Dooley indifferently. Dooley was scared. He was really scared. He had never seen a lunatic like Yi Li. All right. He'll get the sect master to come and see you. Dooley used the last bit of his strength to say to Yi Li. Yi Li thought that Dooley was quite sensible. Then, he raised his palm and a gentle white spiritual light appeared in his palm. The white light flew towards Dooley and attached to his legs and right arm. In an instant, the bloody holes on Dooley's legs and right arm disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye. How is this possible? The outer court disciples in the plaza sucked in a breath of cold air. They truly didn't dare to believe that this was real, but no matter how they rubbed their eyes, the result was the same. However, the one who was the most shocked was Dooley. At this moment, there were absolutely no words that could describe Dooley's shock. He looked at Yi Li in horror. He would rather believe that the sky was about to collapse than believe that this young man in front of him could have such a divine technique. "All right, tell your sect master to come and see me," Yili said to Dooley calmly. After saying that, Yili stopped looking at Dooley. He turned around to look at Yun Duo and Tian'er, only to find that Yun Duo was frozen on the spot with her mouth agape as if she was frozen. Yili looked at Yun Duo indifferently and said slowly, "Are you very shocked?" Yun Duo came back to her senses when she heard this. She could not help but take 3 steps back. Her fair face was filled with shock. She did not know how to answer Yili. She really did not know. But at this moment Yili continued, "Don't be shocked forever because everything I Yili do will shock you for 3 days and 3 nights. Dooley had already headed to the inner sect. As for the remaining outer sect elders and disciples in the square, their faces were filled with fear. This pressure that was as deep as the sea made them unable to breathe. They swallowed their saliva and looked at Yili in horror. At this moment Yili's hair was fluttering even though there was no wind. He was like a demon lord descending from the sky, like an evil god in the mortal world. "You don't have to look at me so fearfully. I came to the Mystic Pavilion to ask your sect master to accept Tian'er as his disciple. That's all." Yili glanced at everyone in the square and said. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone in the square was stunned again. Ask their sect master to accept Tian'er as his disciple? One had to know that the sect master never took in disciples. They naturally knew that the Tian'er that Yili was talking about was the little girl beside him. However, everyone in the square knew that the person in front of them would have nowhere to go once their sect master came. As one of the 5 major sects of the Mystic Land, the Mystic Pavilion had never suffered such humiliation. Chapter 672, The 10th Elder of the Inner Sect is here B0xN0VL. CM Editor, hence everyone in the square looked at Yili in shock. The faint aura emitted from Yili's body made them feel that it was too terrifying. However, they knew that as long as the sect master arrived, this person would definitely die. He would have no chance of survival. "Who dares to cause trouble in my mystic pavilion?" A thunderous voice entered everyone's ears, and they felt their ears go deaf. Yili looked in the direction of the voice and saw an old man in the air. The old man's face was fair and handsome. When he was young he must have been a handsome man. "It's the 10th elder." An outer sect disciple exclaimed. The 10th elder that this disciple was referring to was not an outer sect elder, but an inner sect elder. Not to mention his realm, even his status was higher than Dooley's. Yili's handsome face was as calm as water. The old man in the air was a 5th-tier transcender. He thought that this mystic pavilion wasn't that strong. It didn't look like it could compare to the sword sect. Is the mystic pavilion really one of RHE 5 major sects in the mystic land? Yili looked at Yun Duo indifferently. As soon as these words were spoken, Yun Duo couldn't help but tremble. She looked at Yili in shock. Actually, the Mystic Pavilion is only one of the 5 great sects south of the Mystic Land. The south of the Mystic Land is the weakest place in the Mystic Land. However, in order to show the strength of the Mystic Pavilion, everyone says that the Mystic Pavilion is one of the 5 great sects in RHE Mystic Land. Yun Duo replied in a trembling voice. Yili understood he chose the wrong sect. However, since he was already here he decided to just stay here. He was too lazy to change places. The 10th elder jumped down from midair and arrived beside Yili. 10th elder, it's him. Dooley stared at Yili. The 10th elder's name was Duan Shan. As an inner sect elder, he was not often seen by these outer sect disciples. Now they all looked at the 10th elder. The 10th elder is here. Let's see how this person can still be arrogant. That's right. He actually dares to challenge the dignity of our mystic pavilion alone. He really doesn't know his place. Just wait and see. This person will die before long. The outer sect disciples in RHE Square all showed a playful smile on their faces. Yun Duo stole a glance at Yili. She really didn't know why Yili was still so calm. Even an inner sect elder was here. Was he really not afraid of death? She suddenly remembered that Yili was a member of the dark race. She clearly saw the zombies under Yili's control. Although Yili looked exactly like a human, no one would believe that he wasn't a member of the dark race. Yili naturally heard the discussions of the outer sect disciples in the square. He looked at Dooley indifferently and slowly said, "I told you to call your sect master to see me, but you called an elder over. You're disrespecting my words." As soon as these words were spoken, all the disciples in the square were furious to the extreme. Thousands of feet of anger rushed out from their heads. They originally thought that Yi Li was already arrogant enough, but now they realized that they were completely wrong. Young man, you're very bold. At least, I've never seen a young man as bold as you. Duan Shan, the 10th elder of the inner sect, looked at Yi Li and said, Since you are an inner sect elder, tell your sect master to rake Tian'er in as his disciple, Yi Li said slowly. Chapter 673, Who are you to talk to me like that? B0xn0 Vel. CM When Duan Shan heard Yi Li's words, he was so angry that his eyes widened. He glared at Yi Li. Brat, what did you just say? Duan Shan asked coldly. Yi Li smiled faintly, his handsome face expressionless. I didn't expect you to be deaf apart from your mediocre strength, Yi Li said slowly. As soon as he said this, everyone present was shocked. They could not believe that Yi Li would dare to say such a thing. Do you know who he is? The Grand Elder of the Outer Sect, Du Li roared at Yi Li. No. Yi Li shook his head. Du Li shouted angrily, He's the 10th Elder of the Inner Sect, a 5th-tier transcender Duan Shan. After Yi Li's attack just now, Du Li was very clear that he wasn't Yi Li's match. However, the 10th Elder was a 5th-tier transcender. However, what Du Li didn't expect was that Yi Li's face still didn't change at all. An ant? Yi Li said calmly. What? Silence, a deadly silence. Everyone in the square widened their eyes. Ha ha ha. 10th Elder Duan Shan suddenly burst into laughter. He was laughing so hard that he could not even straighten his back. What are you laughing at? Yi Li looked at Duan Shan in confusion. Duan Shan looked at Yi Li coldly. Brat, I really admire you. You clearly know that you're about to die. Why are you still so calm? Everyone in the square looked at Yi Li. They wanted to see how Yi Li would answer. Unfortunately, they would rather believe that they were about to die than think that Yi Li would say such a thing. Do you think an ant like you is worthy of saying such words to me, Yi Li? Yi Li's face was full of playfulness. You. 10th Elder Duan Shan was extremely furious. This was the most furious he had ever been since he was born. Yi Li had called him an ant twice in a row. As the 10th Elder of the Inner Sect of the Mystic Pavilion, how could he tolerate it? 10th Elder, stop talking nonsense with this kid. Let's attack. Du Li looked at Duan Shan and said. Duan Shan nodded and stared at Yi Li. He said coldly, Goodbye, brat. As soon as he finished speaking, Duan Shan raised his palm and shouted at Yi Li, Fire palm. Suddenly, a raging flame shot out from Duan Shan's palm. The flame condensed into a ferocious tiger and flew towards Yi Li. Seeing this, Yun Duo hurriedly looked at Yi Li, only to find that Yi Li's face was still as calm as water. Yun Duo had never seen someone like Yi Li. She felt that Yi Li was a devil, a great devil of the dark race. Yi Li looked at the incoming fire tiger indifferently. A sword had already appeared in his hand. How could words describe how terrifying this sword was? The sword intense soared into the sky. Everyone in the square took 3 steps back and looked at the sword in Yi Li's hand in shock. Of course, this sword was the ancient Dragon Abyss sword. Swish. Yi Li held the ancient Dragon Abyss sword and slashed at the fire tiger. The fire tiger instantly disappeared without a trace. How is this possible? 10th Elder Duan Shan was dumbfounded. He looked at Yi Li in shock. Even if he used all his strength, he would never have thought that Yi Li could so easily dissolve his fire palm. Duan Shan and Du Li looked at the ancient Dragon Abyss sword in Yi Li's hand again. Their eyes widened because they had never seen such a terrifying weapon. Chapter 674. Do you believe that I can cut open the sky with a sword? B0xn0 Vel. CM Everyone in the square looked at the ancient Dragon Abyss sword in Yi Li's hand. They were terrified. What kind of sword was this? It was as if they would lose their souls with a single glance at this sword. With a second glance, they would enter the cycle of reincarnation. Regardless of their cultivation realms, they all felt the same. Yi Li looked at Duan Shan, the 10th Elder of the Inner Sect. I think you have to agree now, right? If Duan Shan still didn't know that their mystic pavilion couldn't afford to offend Yi Li, then he was a complete idiot. Agreed, Duan Shan quickly said. Ask your sect master to come and see me. Are you willing? Yi Li looked at Duan Shan and continued. Yes. Duan Shan knew that he could not say no or he would say goodbye to this world forever. At this moment, everyone in the square was frozen on the spot like clay sculptures. No one dared to say a word. Yi Li smiled and looked at Duan Shan indifferently. Then why are you still standing there? Aren't you going? When Duan Shan heard this, he came back to his senses. He hurriedly ran out of the square, his speed reaching the fastest speed in history. "Senior, you're really amazing," Tiana whispered to Yili. Although Tiana had an SS-class genetic talent, she was not even 10 years old and was only a level 5 awakened being. However, she could naturally see how terrifying Yili was. As for Yun Duo, all the strength in her body seemed to have been sucked dry by something. At this moment she was already limp on the ground. Yili ignored Yun Duo and slowly walked towards the Grand Elder of the outer sect, Du Li. When Du Li saw Yili walking towards him, he felt as if a bolt from the blue struck his head, causing him to retreat continuously. "Brat! No. Senior, what do you want?" The outer sect Grand Elder Du Li's voice was filled with extreme fear. He dared to swear that he had never been so afraid. Yili walked in front of Du Li. He looked at Du Li indifferently and said slowly, "Guess if my sword can cut open the sky?" Alt. When Du Li heard this, his mouth opened so wide that even an extra-large bowl could be put into it, and it didn't close for a long time. Yili's voice was not loud, but everyone in the square heard him. Their expressions were definitely not any better than Du Li's. A sword could slash open the sky? This must be a dream. I believe you, I believe you. Of course, Du Li didn't believe it, but he didn't dare to say that he didn't believe it. Yili naturally knew what Du Li and everyone in the square were thinking. Anyway, they still had to wait for their sect master to come. There was still time. Since they didn't believe him, he would show them. Yili raised the ancient dragon abyss sword, and in an instant, a true dragon occupied the sky. Terrifying sword cries kept ringing in everyone's ears. Everyone in the square held their breath and looked at Yili in shock. Although they did not believe that Yili could cut open the sky with one sword, they still wanted to see how far Yili could go. Yili said word by word without any hesitation, "I have a sword that can break the sky." As soon as he finished speaking, Yili slashed at the sky with the ancient dragon abyss sword. Swish! A soaring sword beam shot out from the tip of the ancient dragon abyss sword. Everyone in the plaza looked at the sky. They found that the sword beam was soaring into the sky, and a shocking bang sounded. Boom! Chapter 675. Mystic Pavilion Sect Master, shouting B0XN0VL. Sim, how is this possible? An outer sect disciple fell limply to the ground. After the shocking bang sounded, the sky split into two, looking extremely shocking. Du Li, who was closest to Yili, was terrified to the extreme. He certainly didn't believe Yili could cut open the sky with one strike just now. However, he didn't expect Yili to really cut open the sky with a sword. The Grand Elder of the outer sect looked at Yili in shock, but he realized that Yili's handsome face was still expressionless. "Do you believe me now?" Yili looked at Du Li indifferently. Du Li was shocked. He swallowed his saliva and said, I believe you." To be honest, if Yili wasn't here, Du Li would have cried. However, he didn't dare to cry in front of Yili. "Who wants to see me?" A loud shout entered everyone's ears. Before he arrived, his voice already did. A few seconds later, a man in his 50s appeared in front of Yili. The man was extremely tall and strong, and his entire body was filled with power. The man was none other than the sect master of Mystic Pavilion, Xiao Teng. "Sect master, it's him." The 10th elder Duan Shan said to Xiao Teng. Xiao Teng looked at Yili and then at the ancient dragon abyss sword in Yili's hand. His expression could not help but change. It was obvious that he was stunned by the ancient dragon abyss sword. "Who are you?" Xiao Teng stared at Yili. Yili looked at Xiao Teng indifferently. Xiao Teng was a Tier 1 chosen one. "My name is Yili. You can also call me Demon King Yili," Yili slowly said to Xiao Teng. Xiao Teng was stunned. Demon King Yili? This name sounded really domineering. "Yili, tell me the purpose of barging into my mystic pavilion." Xiao Teng looked at Yili. Yili smiled. "Tianer, come here." Then Tianer quickly walked to Yili's side. "It's not too much to ask you to take in Tianer as your disciple, right?" Yili looked at Xiao Teng indifferently. Xiao Teng was stunned again. He looked at the little girl in front of him. "Not only is your request too much, it's simply ridiculous." A few seconds later, Xiao Teng sneered at Yili. Everyone in the square looked at each other in bewilderment. They did not believe that the sect master would be a match for Yili, because Yili's sword just now had really shocked them. "Yili, this is the sect master of our mystic pavilion, a Tier 1 chosen one." 10th elder Duan Shan looked at Yili proudly. From Duan Shan's point of view, it was impossible for Yili to be a Tier 1 chosen one. At most, he would be a 7th tier transcender. "Yili, you're actually not afraid?" Duan Shan looked at Yili in shock. He realized that Yi Li's handsome face was still as calm as ever. Yi Li smiled and said to Duan Shan, "How would an ant like you know how high the sky is and how wide the earth is?" You. 10th Elder Duan Shan flew into a rage. "So, do you agree?" Yi Li looked at Xiaoting. Xiaoting sneered. "I just said that your request is not only overboard but also ridiculous. So you don't understand what I mean?" Swish. Suddenly, a wave of sword intent spread out rapidly. Everyone in the square was scared out of their wits by this sword intent. They looked at Yi Li in horror. Then they were shocked. The ancient dragon abyss sword in Yi Li's hand was already pressed against Xiaoting's neck. Chapter 676. Dark race members appeared at the foot of the mountain B0xN0 See him what? Everyone in the square widened their eyes. They hurriedly blinked because they felt that they had seen wrongly. Before they could see clearly, the ancient dragon abyss sword in Yi Li's hand was pressed against their sect master's neck. What kind of speed was this? Do you still think my request is ridiculous? Yi Li looked at Xiaoting indifferently. Xiaoting was shocked. What kind of speed is this? Not to mention the people in the square, even he did not see how Yi Li attacked. You're just a tier 1 chosen one. Why do you ask so much? Yi Li smiled calmly. Just a tier 1 chosen one? Everyone in the square was stunned again. They could swear that they were really stunned. What do you want? Xiaoting looked at Yi Li in horror. Yi Li smiled faintly. There was no change in his handsome face. He slowly said, "Didn't I already tell you? I want you to take in Tian'er as your disciple." "All right, one agree," Xiaoting quickly said. Yi Li smiled again. Of course he knew that Xiaoting did not agree willingly. How could he sincerely teach Tian'er in this case? "I don't think you want to agree." A playful look appeared on Yi Li's face. As soon as these words were spoken, Xiaoting's expression immediately changed. "Yes, I really want to," Xiaoting hurriedly said. As long as Yi Li's ancient dragon abyss sword was 1 inch closer, his life would disappear from this world forever. Everyone in the square was scared out of their wits as they looked at the scene in front of them. How could they dare to speak? Yi Li slowly put down the ancient dragon abyss sword and looked at Xiaoting playfully. "You're Tian'er's master now. You have to nurture Tian'er as the future sect master," Yi Li slowly said to Xiaoting. Yes. Of course, Xiaoting did not dare to refute Yi Li's words. He quickly responded. Oh no. At this moment an extremely terrified voice entered everyone's ears. A disciple ran over with an extremely terrified expression. He looked at Grand Elder Duli in horror. "Grand Elder, there are many dark race members at the foot of the mountain." This disciple was an outer sect disciple. He naturally did not know that Xiaoting was the sect master and only knew the Grand Elder. "What?" Duli exclaimed. Everyone in the square naturally heard this disciple's words. They all looked at each other. The dark race appeared at the foot of the mountain? Xiaoting was also stunned. Located in the south of the Mystic Land, they never had any interactions with the dark race. Why did the dark race suddenly appear at the foot of the mountain? "Follow me down the mountain to take a look," Xiaoting said to Duan Shan and Du Li. Duan Shan and Du Li nodded and followed Xiaoting out. Yi Li scanned the area with his heavenly spirit eyes and realized that the dark race members at the foot of the mountain were very strong. He knew that Xiaoting did not sincerely want to be Tian'er's master, so he naturally had to do something. "Tian'er, you stay here." After saying that, Yi Li activated the swift steps and disappeared on the spot. At the foot of the Mystic Pavilion Mountain, there were more than 10 dark race members. These dark race members were actually all 10th tier master level dark race members. At this moment, Xiaoting, Duan Shan, and Du Li appeared in front of them. "Our Mystic Pavilion and your dark mountain have always minded our own business. What are you doing here?" Xiaoting said coldly. Chapter 677. Do you believe in your eyes? B0xN0 Vel. CMA 10th tier master level dark race member laughed coldly as he stared at Xiaoting. "Sect Master Xiao, our dark mountain has encountered an unprecedented existence, so we would like to ask for your help," the 10th tier master level dark race member said. Xiaoting was stunned. He wondered if the dark race members were stupid. They actually asked the human forces for help when they were in danger? However, Xiaoting really could not understand. The Dark Mountain was a super powerful faction south of the Mystic Land. What super powerful existence could force them to such a state? "Let's go back. Our Mystic Pavilion won't help you." Xiao Ting said as he glanced at the dozen or so 10th-tier master-level dark race members in front of him. Sect Master Xiao, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Our mountain lord said that if your mystic pavilion doesn't help us, we will destroy your mystic pavilion. A 10th-tier master-level dark race member said coldly. A master-level dark race was equivalent to a transcender, and a 10th-tier master-level dark race was naturally equivalent to a top existence of the dark race. Xiao Ting was a Tier 1 chosen one, and his cultivation realm was higher than theirs. However, facing more than 10 10th-tier master-level dark race members, he was also somewhat powerless. As for Duan Shan and Du Li, their cultivation levels were even lower. Are you threatening me? Xiao Ting stared at the dark race members in front of him. He had been threatened twice since he was born. The first time was just now and the other time was now. Sect Master Xiao, I think you have to understand one thing. Our mountain master asked your mystic pavilion to help only to let your mystic pavilion take the lead. Compared to being destroyed, it should be better to be cannon fodder, a 10th-tier master-level dark race member said with a disdainful smile. As soon as these words were spoken, the dozen or so master-level dark race members all laughed. At this moment Yi Li was in a dark corner, watching this scene calmly with an indifferent expression. Xiao Ting stared at these dark race members. For a moment he felt very helpless. Sect Master Xiao, do you agree or not? A 10th-tier master-level dark race member asked Xiao Ting. He wants say yes. A sudden voice entered the ears of the dark race members. The 10 or so 10th-tier master-level dark race members were all stunned. They hurriedly looked in the direction of the voice and saw a handsome young man walking over slowly. For some reason Xiao Ting, Duan Shan, and Du Li heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that it was Yi Li who came. Human, who are you? A 10th-tier master-level dark race member looked at Yi Li and asked. Yi Li smiled. I'm just the person who will kill you. As soon as these words were spoken, the dozen or so master-level dark race members were all stunned. Human, what did you say? The dozen or so dark race members glared at Yi Li. They had never seen such an arrogant human before. But before I kill you, I, Yi Li, want to give you a chance. Just disappear within a second, Yi Li said slowly. Ha ha ha. The dozen or so 10th-tier master-level dark race members all laughed loudly, as if they had never heard such a funny joke. Human, do you know that this is the funniest joke I've ever heard in my life? A master-level dark race member looked at Yi Li and said with a smile. Yi Li smiled lightly. His handsome face was very calm. Do you really believe in your eyes? What? The dark race members didn't understand what Yi Li meant. Don't ever believe your own eyes because your eyes can deceive you, Yi Li said calmly. Chapter 678, Dark Mountain B0XN0VL. CM more than 10 10th-tier master-level dark race members all stared at Yi Li. Human, from what you're saying, you're going to stand up for Mystic Pavilion? Yi Li smiled faintly. There was no change in his handsome face. He slowly said, I told you just now that I'll give you a second to disappear, but it seems like you don't want to disappear now. As soon as these words were spoken, the dozen or so dark race members were all infuriated. Human, I think you're courting death, a 10th-tier master-level dark race member roared. Unfortunately, as soon as this 10th-tier master-level dark race member finished speaking, he melted into nothingness. He could no longer leave any traces of this wonderful world. How is this possible? The 10 or so 10th-tier master-level dark race members were all greatly shocked. No matter what, they couldn't believe this was real. A 10th-tier master-level dark race member had disappeared just like that? Human, you did this? A master-level dark race member looked at Yi Li in disbelief. They didn't see how Yi Li attacked at all. None of them saw it. An evil smile suddenly appeared on Yi Li's face. Air? In an instant, more than 10 10th-tier master-level dark race members all started screaming. Their screams were so shrill that it really made one's scalp tingle. Xiao Ting, Duan Shan, and Du Li looked at the scene in front of them in shock. They could no longer imagine how terrifying Yi Li was. This was too terrifying. In just an instant, more than 10 master-level dark race members died. Even in death, they couldn't believe that they had died so easily. I heard them say that they are from Dark Mountain. What kind of place is Dark Mountain? Yi Li turned to look at Xiao Ting. Xiao Ting came back to his senses when he heard this. He hurriedly looked at Yi Li and said, Senior, the Dark Mountain is the largest force of the dark race in the south of the Mystic Land. Yi Li nodded. Then where is the Dark Mountain? Xiao Ting didn't dare to hide anything. He quickly told Yi Li the location of the Dark Mountain. Yi Li was stunned. Wasn't Ada there? Could it be? Yili suddenly thought of a possibility. That was, the super powerful existence that those 10th tier master level dark race members mentioned. Was Ada thinking of this? Yili couldn't help but show a playful smile. By the way, I'll leave Tianer to you. And that yin duo. With that, Yili activated swift steps and disappeared from the spot, leaving Xiaoteng and the others stunned on the spot. After a long time, Xiaoteng, Duanshan, and Duli finally came back to their senses. If they were still unconvinced by Yili in the square earlier, they were truly convinced now. More than 10 10th tier master level dark race members were instantly killed. What could they not accept? Most importantly, Yili had saved their mystic pavilion. After knowing the location of the Dark Mountain, Yili headed towards the Dark Mountain. Brother, where are we going now? Yutong looked at Yili in confusion. To find Erda, Yili said slowly. As soon as he said that, Hongye, Yutong, and Longyu became very happy. Ada was the captain of their Apocalypse Legion and the strongest zombie, a 5th tier lord level zombie. Yili brought the Apocalypse Legion to a ruined city. Behind the city was a black mountain with an extremely oppressive aura. The mountain was the strongest force south of the Dark Race's mystic land, the Dark Mountain. As for this city, it must have been a long time since someone was here, but there were quite a few zombies here. Chapter 679, I can kill you with my eyes. B0xn0 CM Yili looked at the zombies in front of him indifferently. These zombies were too weak and pitiful in front of him. Roar, roar. Suddenly, hundreds of zombies rushed towards Yili's group. In this situation, there was no need for Yili to do anything. When hundreds of zombies rushed over, Longyu had already rushed out with the water and fire merciless spear in his hand. Longyu was a tier 1 lord level zombie. These few hundred zombies were simply a joke in front of him. In an instant, these few hundred zombies fell to the ground. Yili opened the synthesis grid in his mind and synthesized all the zombies. Let's go up the mountain, Yili said slowly. Then Yili and his group headed towards the Dark Mountain. The Dark Mountain was a black mountain. It looked extremely oppressive. When Yili and his group arrived at the Dark Mountain, they were immediately surrounded by dozens of Dark Race members. These Dark Race members' levels were not high. They all stared at Yili coldly. Who are you? How dare you come to the Dark Mountain? Do you want to die? A 7th tier Dark Race member looked at Yili coldly. Yili smiled faintly, his handsome face expressionless. How can a Dark Race member like you change? Yili asked slowly. Change? The Dark Race members surrounding Yili and his group all laughed coldly when they heard this. You should think about how you can change after you die, the 7th tier Dark Race member said proudly. In the eyes of dozens of Dark Race members, Yili, Hongye, Yutong, and Longyu were all dead. There was no possibility of survival for them. Do you believe that one can kill you with my eyes? Yili glanced at the dozens of Dark Race members in front of him and said, Ha ha ha. When the dozens of Dark Race members surrounding Yili heard Yili's words, they all laughed out loud as if they had never heard such a funny joke before. Kill all of us with your eyes? The 7th tier Dark Race member laughed so hard that he couldn't even straighten his back. He dared to swear that this was the funniest joke he had ever heard since he was born. You don't believe me? Yili looked indifferently at the 7th tier Dark Race member who spoke. Human, what kind of place do you think the Dark Mountain is? It's the strongest force of the Dark Race in the south of the Mystic Land. Killed us all with your eyes? What a braggart. The 7th tier Dark Race member looked at Yili with extreme disdain. Yili shook his head slightly. He looked at the 7th tier Dark Race member and said calmly, Do you believe that one can let you see their corpses in 1 second? He was naturally referring to the dozens of Dark Race members surrounding him. Human, at this point, what else do you have to be arrogant about? The 7th tier Dark Race member shouted angrily. If Yili was joking just now, then Yili was now extremely arrogant. Yili sighed to himself. Since this 7th tier Dark Race didn't believe him, he could only prove it with his actions. Then Yili activated the Heavenly Spirit Eyes. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Dozens of white spiritual light attacks flew out from Yili's eyes. The dozens of Dark Race members surrounding Yili's group widened their eyes. They would never have thought that Yili would be able to launch such an attack. Alt? Instantly, screams began to ring incessantly. Chapter 680, They were all zombies. B0xn0VL. CM The dozens of Dark Race members surrounding Yili's group were instantly finished. Yili's expression was calm. One could imagine how weak these dark race members were in front of him and the Apocalypse Legion. Then Yi Li slowly walked forward, followed by the Apocalypse Legion. In the Great Hall of the Dark Mountain, a fifth-tier dark race member ran in terror. The expression on his face was one of extreme fear. Mountain Master, something bad has happened. In the main hall of the Dark Mountain, the Mountain Master of the Dark Mountain sat on the throne above. The Dark Mountain Master was a Tier 2 Lord-level dark race member. "What is it?" the Mountain Master asked. "A few humans came to the foot of the Dark Mountain and killed many of our brothers. They have already come up the mountain." The fifth-tier dark race member hurriedly replied. "What?" When the Mountain Master heard this, he was instantly enraged. How dare a human barge into his dignified dark mountain? Wasn't it no different from courting death? Suddenly the Mountain Master disappeared. Yi Li and the Apocalypse Legion arrived at the plaza of the Dark Mountain. At this moment, there were almost 1,000 dark race members of different levels surrounding them. These dark race members all looked strange. There were even many crabs that walked sideways. Then, the Mountain Master of the Dark Mountain appeared in front of Yi Li. The Mountain Master stared at Yi Li and the Apocalypse Legion. No human had ever dared to break into his dark mountain, so how could he not be angry? "Humans, I really can't imagine how many bear hearts and leopard guts you have eaten?" The Mountain Master looked at Yi Li and the Apocalypse Legion in confusion. In his opinion, there was no other explanation for Yi Li and the Apocalypse Legion to barge into the Dark Mountain except to courting death. "Humans?" Yi Li smiled and continued, "Are you calling me?" The Dark Mountain Master was stunned and did not understand what Yi Li meant. He then looked at Yi Li coldly. "I'm not only calling you, but also the 3 humans beside you." Hongye Yutong and Long Yes auras had already been concealed by Yi Li. The dark race members of the Dark Mountain naturally didn't know that they were zombies. Yi Li smiled calmly. "Actually, they are not humans." "What?" Thousands of dark race members were all shocked. "Not human?" They really couldn't imagine what else the Apocalypse Legion could be other than humans. "Humans, stop trying to be mysterious. Tell me, what else can they be other than humans?" The Mountain Master looked at Yi Li mockingly. Yi Li looked at the sun in the sky. A few seconds later he slowly said, "They are zombies." How was that possible? Shocked, the most shocked in history. Thousands of dark race members looked at the Apocalypse Legion in shock. They really couldn't believe that the Apocalypse Legion members were zombies. "Human, do you think him a fool?" The Dark Mountain Master looked at Yi Li unhappily. Yi Li shook his head slightly. He wondered why no one believed the truth these days. "They don't believe that you're zombies, so show them what you've got," Yi Li said to the Apocalypse Legion. As the saying went, a wise head made a close mouth. With Yi Li's order, Hongye Yutong and Long Yu all disappeared from where they were at the fastest speed in history. In an instant, the entire situation began to turn gruesome. Thousands of dark race members fell to the ground continuously. The suppression of numbers was useless under absolute strength. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.